right, hello, everyone. Welcome to Conlang with me, session 5. I'm just getting things set up before we start. So we're just waiting just a moment before things really get going here, and I can go into review and updates and stuff like that, and then we can get started. So just one moment more before we get started here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started now with the review. So welcome to Conlang with me. This is the 5th total session of Conlang with me on Twitch. It will be the 3rd one that is recorded because the first 2 were kind of lost. And in the last 2 sessions, session 3 and session 4, I did a pretty comprehensive review of everything I've done so far. So if you want more details about what I've done so far, you can go back and watch those. If you're watching these on Twitch within 2 weeks of the 3rd broadcast, if you're watching this later, you can probably check out the companion YouTube that should be up by that point in the future. But there should be places where you can see a more comprehensive review. But I am going to start with a review, just a brief review of everything we've done so far today, before we jump into the next topic. So here I have my agenda, and so if we look at the sort of items that I've gone over, and skip over stuff like review and questions, we see I started with talking about my goals with the language, features I knew I would want to have in this language, and potential influences. I actually didn't start with influences. That's sort of been ongoing as they come up. Influences from other languages. So let's take a look at that. That's all on overview. So on overview we have the goal that I want to use this language to write about, take notes on, maybe talk about humanities and social sciences, particularly history, linguistics, literature, and these other topics here. I have a particular interest in linguistics and anthropology. Those are sort of the main things driving a lot of the choices with this language. And I want it to be like efficient for these topics, kind of geared or engineered towards detailed information being compact about these topics and being sort of clear. And then I also want it to be aesthetically pleasing to myself. This is kind of a vague goal, but I want it to look nice and sound nice, which is very subjective. And last time, when we went over questions I had gotten from previous sessions, we talked about what does this make my conlang? What kind of language is it? So we talked about how it's an engineered language. I'm trying to see if I can find where we ultimately put that down. I don't know if we did actually ultimately write that down. But these sort of goals and some of the features make it a chiefly engineered language. so an eng-lang, I guess, is what we'd call that. And it also has personal aspects to it, personal language. Hello, chat. Thank you for being here. So I'm just doing a review real quick. So it's an engineered language with personal aspects to it, sort of making it efficient for talking about these topics, humanities and social sciences. So it's engineered in that way, but also maybe particularly geared to how I understand these topics, and aesthetically pleasing to myself. So there's going to be some very subjective choices I'm going to make as well, so long as they still kind of help with my understanding of how I'm going to talk about these topics here. So it's an engineered language, it's a personal language. I do not know if it's going to be a posteriori or a priori yet. We talked about those two things last time when I was answering questions. So don't know that yet. That's still a question. Or if it's like a mix, I might mix the two, we'll see. But we do know these sort of aspects here. Oh, whoa, no. That was a control V there. Whoops. That was just a link to this stream. Alright. And then we talked about features. I don't want it to be minimalistic because I want it to be detailed information in a compact space. I want noun declensions. I want a fusional typology. We talked about typology last time. We'll go over that again. And I want easy derivation between parts of speech. We had a question about what this stands for. It stands for parts of speech. All right. Influences I'll come back to as we do our quick overview here. So the first thing I talked about was actually nouns during the first session. We talked about nouns. We talked about why I want some noun classes. I've thought more about these noun classes between last time and this time, and I might end up merging some of these together. But I've decided any questions about merging the noun classes and about merging the numbers in the noun classes, because we have mass and count, collective and singulative number here. In the noun classes, I mentioned a few times last time I might want to merge numbers in some of these and not have a grammatical distinction between those two numbers in some of the classes. What I've decided is I'm going to push those decisions to later on when we talk about going into the declension. I have a declension sheet open. We haven't really touched this yet. I just briefly looked at it last time. This is the declension sheet as it currently stands with the 10 noun classes I have. And I think when we talk about potentially merging the classes and merging numbers within these classes, collective and singulative, we'll just wait until we actually go in and talk about doing so then. Because I have some ideas, but I'm going to hold off on them. I just took note of them, and we'll talk about that later. But during the first session, we talked about nouns. We talked about noun classes and what would be in each noun class. And we talked about different number systems. And I landed on doing this sort of dependent slightly on noun class system, where for some noun classes it's mass and count. So mass being unmarked, count being marked for number. And then with some of the other classes, like animals, humans, supernatural entities, it would be more of like a collective singulative number system. And I went over that again last time, so if you want a slightly more detailed explanation, you can look at that. Or if anyone in the chat wants more of an explanation, I can answer that now. I don't mind doing that, but that's what we did during the first session. We made that decision. The second session, we talked about verbs and what verbs will mark for. At the very least, I want them to mark for tense. In the past, I want them to mark for perfective and imperfective. I want realis and irrealis moods, so whether something is real or something is hypothetical. And then we talked about evidentiality. I'm going to have primary and secondary evidentiality. It's sort of like indirect, indirective and direct evidentiality in Turkic languages, but slightly different because I'm talking about sources. So primary sources for my information versus secondary sources for my information. And primary can also include myself. So primary, so I either have a primary source or I am the primary source, or I don't have a primary source and it's a secondary source. And if it's not sourced, then it's probably going to be irrealis. It maybe is true, but it's not confirmed. So that's how the verbs are going to work. And then I have past and non-past. And then I have perfective and imperfective in the past. So happened at a point in time, versus happened over a span of time in the past. And I'm not really making that distinction in the present or future or anything like that. So it's just in the past where that matters. And I've decided that I want the perfective primary evidentiality realis to be the unmarked one. I suspect that will be the one I use the most. If I find that imperfective is more common, I'll make that one unmarked. But we'll just have to see how that shakes out in the future. Then we talked about syntax, and I talked about alignments. I gave a very detailed explanation of alignments in the second session, which is lost now. I did a quick review of some of the more common ones in the third session, which is up. But I decided to land on active-stative, and I gave a detailed explanation last time as well on why I have active-stative with fluid S and how that works. But the gist is, in transitive sentences, I'm marking when I have an agent, unless the agent is an experiencer of some cognitive thing. But if it's not, then my transitives are going to mark the agent and leave the patient unmarked. And in intransitives, I have the choice whether or not to mark the argument of the intransitive verb as an agent, or not mark it, have it be a patient, depending on what I want the interpretation of the verb to be. If I want it to be more of a state of being that the patient is in, or have it be something that the agent is actively doing to themselves, or just doing, and it's not really affecting anyone else. There's no patient. And I also talked in the third session about ditransitives. And we talked about different ditransitive alignments, and I landed on sort of an indirective alignment, which is really common in a lot of languages. And so I just have the donor, the giver in ditransitives to be the agent, the patient, the thing that's given be the patient, and then the one who receives it be the recipient, having them be marked for another case. In this language, it would be dative. Once I decided that, and I also talked about the language being topic prominent. So generally, I don't think there's going to be a specific order that these have to go in, like agent could come first then patient, or vice versa. But I do want the topic to come before the verb. So generally, the verb is going to come near the beginning of the sentence with all these after it, except for the topic, which will come first. And that's just going to make it easy to highlight a topic without any special marking for it. It'll just come at the beginning and tell me, when I'm reading over something I've written, what the topic of the sentence is. All right. Then we kind of went back to nouns once we decided what alignment we were going to have, what different alignments we were going to have, and we talked about semantic roles that things in the sentence can play, and that sort of very detailed explanation of different semantic roles is in session 3. And I decided what cases I want and what sort of roles they will describe and how. And so we went through all that, and I landed on having 7 cases, the patient still being unmarked, the agent, and everything else being marked with some kind of case marking. All right, so that was session 3. Last time was session 4. This was on Thursday. And in session 4, we talked about questions I'd received about the kinds of language this is. So we talked a little bit about engineered languages versus auxlangs versus artistic languages. And then we also talked about typology. And I ended up moving the typology stuff over to my syntax sheet just to consolidate a bit. And we talked about different kinds of languages based on how they organize words and formatives. Formatives just being any kind of pieces of speech that mark grammatical things. So things like prefixes, suffixes, infixes, circumfixes, non-linear things like vowel templates and uplout and stuff like that. And we talked about different ways of thinking about typology. So talked about degree of synthesis, whether we have a low morpheme to word rate or a high morpheme to word rate. Talked about fusion, whether things are isolating, concatenative, kind of stacked on words, or kind of grafted within a word in a nonlinear fashion. We talked about flexivity, how many variants of a specific marker there can be depending on different classes. We talked about exponents, how sort of combined into one marking versus separated into separate markings things can be. And so those were the different sort of ways of talking about the typology of the language. and I landed on sort of these vague ideas. My goal is to have things be relatively compact, so I think mostly cumulative exponents would make the most sense for that. That's what I meant when I said I want the language to be fusional. So on a high degree of fusion, so having cumulative exponents plus mostly concatenative and nonlinear fusion. Not really isolating. I could still achieve cumulative exponents while also being isolating if I have particles that mark a lot of things at once. So I could have that. So I might change my mind about this. I want things to be relatively flexible because, at least with nouns, because I'm going to have a lot of noun cases that also will have variance based on the noun class. Because I have currently 10 noun classes. So there will be different versions of each case for each noun class. There will be high flexibility with that. I'm not so sure about verb flexibility, though, because I don't know how many different classes of verbs I will need, especially given how much of my sort of interpretation of verbs depends on... Oh, I don't need to leave syntax. Interpretations of verbs depend more on the syntax and the cases. Changing cases, for example, between agentive and patientive for an intransitive will change how you interpret the intransitive. So in that way, I don't really need, different, categories of intransitive potentially. I could just have the nouns do more of that work. So verbs might not be as flexive as nouns will be, but mostly flexive probably overall, you could say. So that's how I landed on typology last time. And then once we talked about typology, I believe, let me just look at my agenda so I'm not skipping something. Once we talked about typology, we talked about pronouns. Yeah, we talked about pronouns. And with pronouns, we talked about what the sort of use cases for pronouns would be in this language. So generally, with personal pronouns, we tend to have first person, second person, and third person pronouns. And then there's often different categories like number, inclusivity, that sort of thing with pronouns. So first person would generally be like the self, the person speaking, and people associated with them. So like I, we, etc. But thinking about the fact that I have a mass or collective and count versus singulative number kind of makes the, if I apply that to my pronouns as well, I could just have pronouns be separate, or like special, and just have a simple singular plural there if I wanted to. Or there was something else I was thinking about, but I'll kind of get to that once I'm done with the review. But if my default is mass or collective, with first and second persons, it's mostly going to be humans that these are going to be referring to. And unless people are speaking this language with each other, which is mostly not the goal, I'm mostly going to be using this for myself to write. But if other people learn this language and want to use it with each other to talk about humanities and social sciences, they might need these pronouns, so I should at least have them. Also, if I'm quoting people in history, talking to each other, then I will need these. But if the default is mass or collective, then the first person collective would just be like all of us, we, everyone, like all of us in question. And then the count singulative, that should be SGV for singulative, would be, it could be I, like, singular first person, or it could be, a number of us, not all of us, some of us. And then same with second person, so it would be like all of you versus you singular, or a certain number of you, count. And then I talked about why if I have third persons with all of these different noun classes, so like that concept versus that, thing in nature, material in nature versus that animal versus that person, there'd be singulative and collective here. For some of these, like I said, I might merge the numbers when making a distinction is not as necessary. But if we have all these numbers and noun classes, that would be 20 third persons and then the 4 first and second together, so that leaves 24 pronouns times 7 cases, which I think added up to 168 unique pronoun forms. Most of those, though, having like hopefully pretty predictable case markings, so it wouldn't be too hard to remember. Oh yeah, what were FIN and SPN again in the class system? So I can just scroll over and look at that. So FIN stands for phenomenon. So phenomenon, emotion, sensation, condition, or time. Any sort of thing that happens, really, other than, I think most verbs are going to be conceptual rather than phenomenal. But yeah, like here we have like sourness, that would be in this class. Sourness, saltiness, could be anger, and then things like tornado, 5 o'clock, depression, influenza, the condition would be a phenomenon. And then we could also have influenza, the virus, be in this like flora category. So you could actually make that distinction between the virus itself and the condition of having it with the different noun classes. SPN just stands for supernatural. So like a deity, a spirit, something, some kind of entity that is not human or not, you know, in the mundane natural, it'll be supernatural. And this will be really useful for talking about different anthropological and folklore type stuff that I'm going to be working with this language. So that's what these stand for. I just gave them little glosses to make it easier to sort of, you're welcome. No problem. So just to make it easier to gloss things later down the road when I'm marking, you know, how things are going to be grammatically. And I don't want to use numbers like class 1, class 2, class 3, just because I'm already using numbers for first, second, and third. I also talked about why I'm going to have demonstratives and third persons be the same. The problem that can come up with demonstratives versus third persons tends to be about possession, and that won't really be the case in this language, because so far I'm mostly using case marking dative or ablative to mark possessives, datives for alienable, and ablatives for inalienable. So alienable being, it's not, you know, inherently possessed by you, but it's just like a thing you happen to possess, and then inalienable, things that you can't really separate, like your mind or your ancestors, for example, would be inalienable, whereas, you know, your pen would be alienable, and that would be marked with the different cases. And so that would be the case whether it's a demonstrative or a third person pronoun. And also, in practice, saying that location and saying there will probably be the same thing. And also saying, like, that person and saying her in practice will usually be the same. And if you want to highlight the person, you'd make them the topic. So I already have a way to kind of get that dixis across with topic marking. I might have some other ways of marking saliency other than, you know, moving things to the topic. So I don't really need separate third person versus demonstratives. And then finally I talked about interrogatives and indefinites. I like to have those merged typically because I suspect I will have a way to clarify whether something is a question or not. So an interrogative like who, where, and then an indefinite like whatever, someone versus that one, versus who would be, so like someone versus who, or whoever. So the thing that would make that clear is if my sentence is a question, that would make it, you know, who, versus, you know, if it's not a question, then it would be indefinite, and that would be kind of clear from context. But what I decided is rather than having interrogatives and indefinites for every single one of these classes, which would be a lot to have, this is already 20. If I have both numbers, if I add 10 more interrogative indefinites, that would just be a ridiculous amount. So what I'm probably going to do, and that's all this really little squiggle means to me, it's just a reminder to me that I'm not going to have a special form for this. What I'm going to do is have an easy way to just make these third person demonstratives into interrogative or indefinites with some kind of marking, like a little prefix or suffix or something that indicates that, okay, now it's an interrogative or indefinite now. Maybe just like a little suffix on it. It's like, okay, now instead of saying that location, I'm saying what location or whatever location. And instead of saying like them, I'm saying who, it'll kind of switch them into interrogative indefinites rather than having a bunch of unique forms for them. It'll just be a marking. And that, I think, is the last thing we talked about was pronouns. And I said I was going to think more about whether or not I wanted to merge numbers between these things and also merge some more of these categories and have fewer than 10. The main one I'm actually considering still is merging matter, like material, substance, with geography. I was considering that really strongly. I might still do that, but like I said before, I'm going to push that conversation to when I actually get into doing the declension. And I'll think more thoroughly through what the ramifications of having those merged will be when I get to declension. So that was the review of everything we've done so far. So I'm going to go ahead and mark the review as done. We did the review. Sweet. And these notes to self were just, push these merging number and merging classes down to the declension discussion. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and get into adjectives. So last time I said that we would be talking about adjectives this time and whether or not I even want adjectives in this language at all, whether I need them, etc. But I think it needs to be explained, like what an adjective is in the context of this language and what it means for an adjective to exist or not exist. The function, like the syntactic function of adjective, I know is going to need to exist. Like I need to be able to modify and describe things more thoroughly. So that in that case, in that understanding, yes, I will have adjectives. I will have things that can function like adjectives. But whether or not they're going to be like a unique class is the other question. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means. So I want to talk about like what having adjectives means. So this guy here is Morris Swadesh, lived from this time to this time, if you're curious. He's really a well-known but controversial figure in linguistics for lots of reasons. A lot of conlangers will use Swadesh lists. A lot of sociolinguists will use Swadesh lists, so those are named after him. But he had the opinion that using labels like noun, verb, and adjective is not super useful when, comparing languages to each other. They're kind of, they come out of having a lot of the history of linguistics focus on European languages, and so these are clearly categories in a lot of European languages, but not necessarily in every language. And so he kind of was like, these are not the most useful categories to have. And he instead came up with like 7 main categories that words that weren't purely grammatical words would fall into. So that we have entity, action, state, location, time. I have time twice. This should be quantity. There we go. Quantity and indication. What these really mean. Indication is just demonstratives, really, like pointing to things. Quantity is amount, like all of something, some of something. Time is what it sounds like. Time, when something happens. And then location is a place. And these are all in boxes because, in his opinion, these sort of categories in language are kind of locked into a particular part of speech that we might call nouns, verbs, or adjectives, depending on the language. However, these 3, state, action, and entity, were what he called open. They're like open classes that you could have. So depending on the language, they might kind of shuffle different entities, different actions, different states into different parts of speech. So an entity is just anything that you can name. An action is any action you can do, and a state is any state you could be in. And so in some languages, most entities might be nouns, but others might be verbs. And in some languages, most actions might be verbs, but others might be adjectives. In some languages, states could be, nouns. They could be verbs. They could be adjectives, if adjectives exist in the language. And this sort of idea that not all languages have nouns, verbs, and adjectives, this is something that's like heavily debated still in linguistics. A lot of people think that all languages, or most languages, at least have nouns and verbs as separate categories. There are some linguists who will contest that with examples from certain languages. But there's been a lot more research since his research. I think this was done in like the 1940s. I think that was around the time when he made these kinds of assertions. I think this was in a study on Nootka, the language Nootka. But since then, there's been a lot of sort of discourse and debate about what categories are universal and not. I'm not going to say what I think. I'm just going to say what's relevant to this language. I know I want nouns, and I know I want verbs. I want things that are categorized into like entities that I can have in different noun classes, and I also want verbs. I want, actions that I can describe. However, I do kind of want them to be open. I want to be able to easily make a verb into a noun and vice versa. So I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But when I was preparing for today, I wanted to open up some of the notes and reading I took in undergrad on adjectives, and I reviewed an article written in, I think it was like 2005 or 7, can't remember, around that time. It was called Adjective Classes in Typological Perspective. I believe that is the name of the article. But it was written by a linguist named Robert M.W. Dixon, who is well known for studying a lot of Australian languages. And I'm going to go ahead and show sort of his opinion on this stuff. So here he is here. That's Robert M.W. Dixon. And he's still alive. He's in his 80s, I believe now. I think that's how the math works out. He does believe that all languages have nouns and verbs, and which is not as controversial. That is a very common belief, is that all languages have at least nouns and verbs. But he also asserts, which at one time he didn't, but now, as of the mid-2000s, he asserts that also all languages have something that you could call adjectives. Even if the language treats them like nouns or verbs, there's a way to distinguish whether or not they are a separate class, adjectives. And when comparing his ideas to Swadesh's, he said that basically these categories that Swadesh said were open, they basically equate to what most languages would call nouns. Entities are nouns, actions are verbs, and states are adjectives. That's his opinion. And that adjectives could be noun-like and could be verb-like, or could be unique, like not behave like either. But in general, states are adjectives. Just maybe behaving more like verbs in some languages and behaving more like nouns in others. And when he says behave, when we linguists say behave, we mean they take on similar markings and similar roles that these parts of speech take on, but still have ways of distinguishing them, both by function and by meaning. And so in his paper that I was reviewing, he listed a bunch of different criteria for doing so. I'm not really going to care that much about that right now. That's not what I'm talking about. But I do want to highlight that I want to think about how I want to talk about entities, actions, and states when I'm thinking about how much do I want there to be overlap between these sort of classes and whether or not I want adjectives. So when I think about actions versus states, I think about the fact that we've already decided that I'm going to have an active state of language. So I can easily differentiate between an action and a state if it's intransitive by marking whether or not the subject is an agent or agentive or patientive. So I could have a verb like, I could have a word that we would translate as, in English, the usually adjective read, right? And if I have read, let's say I make read a verb. I would have like a verb-like adjective. So I could say read, and I could mark read for, my tense, my aspect, my mood, all of that. And if I have read, to read as a verb, and then I have, my single argument, like let's say I want to say the house is red, right? I would say house, and not mark the house for agent. The house would be patientive. It would just be unmarked, patientive, and that would mean the house is red. So what I've done now is read, even though it's a verb, it translates to what we would call an adjective in English, but like syntactically it's a verb. It functions as a verb. Dixon would say it's a verb-like adjective. It's my predicate. It's sort of like the thing that is happening in the sentence. Redness is happening, and what is red? It's the house. The house is red. So marking the house, or in my language, not marking the house, marking it 0 for patient, would mean that the house is red. But if I have red, and let's say I have someone named Z, for example, Z, like a person's name, and they'd be marked count because they're one person, and then they'd be marked agentive. If I had someone marked agentive and then I have a verb read, now the sentence means that Z reads actively. So what would that mean? That would mean something like red makes something red, maybe paints with the color red, or draws with the color red, or something like that. Or it could even mean that Z maybe becomes red actively, on purpose. Z is putting on rouge or something like that. I could decide what that would mean, depending on what semantics I give this word red. Yeah, and if I wanted to emphasize that it was the self, I could have some kind of reflexive pronoun there to make it clear, like making herself red versus just making something red that I'm not naming. And then that could kind of correlate to a transitive sentence like red, Z, agentive, house, and that would be patientive, unmarked. And that would be basically mean Z reddens the house. So Z paints the house red, or something like that. Z makes the house blush. That it could mean that. I could have another person, like Z reddens, I don't know, let's think of another name. Lydia. So Z makes Lydia blush is what that would mean. Alright, so I wouldn't really, I could have adjectives be verbs, maybe certain adjectives be verbs, and whether or not they're states or actions would be indicated by the case of the nouns in question. But where this gets tricky, where I need to think about this more, so that's not really a question. I could easily differentiate between actions and states with my alignment. That's one benefit of my alignment, is I can easily do that with the active stative. However, if I want to describe something, what are the ramifications of that? If I want to say the red house, if red is a verb, and not, if red is purely a verb, I would need to mark red. I could either have a way to say that red is happening to the house. So I could have red, maybe marked for its tense, etc. Blah 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 blah. Let's say like past, primary, or primary would be unmarked. So I'll just say, and past is unmarked too. But I'll say like perfective. Perfective is unmarked. I'll say imperfective. What's IPV? Imperfective house. This would mean something like the house that was being read. The house that was being read. So the house that was read in the past. Whoa, what just happened? Did I just delete the tab? Whoa, that was weird. Okay, yeah, the house that was being read. So anytime I have an adjective, I'd actually be saying what was happening to the house. So maybe I saw the red house. So I'd have C. This would be primary perfective past. So it would be unmarked. And then I'd have myself would be the experiencer. So I'd have like first person count. So I'll just say singulative. Person singulative. Dative. It would be dative because I'm an experiencer. I'm seeing the house. And then I would have house unmarked because it's a patient. And I could decide whether or not I want my adjectives to come before or after. So I would have maybe red imperfective. Or in this case, if I'm seeing it, if I saw it, I'd say imperfective, yeah. Imperfective house. So this would be I saw the house which was being read. The question then, though, is how do I say I saw the house which was reddening, or maybe the person who was reddening, the redder person. I could probably just have a marking for that. The issue I see with potentially having adjectives just be verbs, the syntax could get tricky. I could have ways of solving that. I could have just like a modifier or maybe participle thing. I could add to the adjectival verb to make sure it's describing. I could come up with participles. I could add that to my verb sheet and say like, this turns it into a participle. And I actually rather like that, because that would allow me to have any sort of tense aspect mood be a participle, so I could differentiate like the house that was being read versus the house that, was read and then stopped being read. Not super useful in this example, but I can imagine adjectives that would be more like the person who was shocked but then got over it kind of thing. That would actually be rather nice. And instead of having individual participles for each tense or aspect or mood, I could just have a marker that can turn anything into a tense aspect or mood. Actually, I like that. My problem is I have this whole noun class system with agreement, and I would like it to mean something. I would like it to be useful. Currently, it will be useful with, anaphora, referring back to nouns based on their class. That will be useful, but I want these to be useful in other ways. So I would kind of like adjectives to agree with nouns and have them be more noun-like. So I might... Okay, I can actually foresee two things happening. I could have all verbs, or all adjectives be verbs of state by default, and then like they can become actions when you have an active participant in them. Or I could split, or I could have them all be noun-like and just not worry about this. Or I could split adjectives, some being verbs, some being nouns. Or I could have the participle marking be a derivational marking that has 10 different forms. A very flexive participle marking that marks for what class of participle it is. Or even have, depending on how my declension works out, whatever marks these words for what case or what class they are, that marking could just also function as a participle marking if you add it to a verb somehow. That could be really interesting. It, gives me the best of both worlds, but it could also get complicated potentially. I'd have to think more about that, and I would probably want to hold off on that until after I finish my declension and figure out what the declensions are. Okay, so before I go into that, or decide that, I do want to look at the idea of splitting adjectives up between some being verbs and some being nouns. I also did want to talk about these other things, entity and action, being open. So I just talked a bit about how I can kind of easily go between action and state, with both of them being verbs. But the thing is, I'm also going to have actions and states functioning as nouns at times. I have whole noun classes for that. I have concept and I have phenomenon. And those, I could easily see verbs becoming verbal nouns in these classes. And I wonder if, instead of having that be the case, I could just have them be nouns and do some kind of compound verb construction that some languages do. I'm thinking of like Hindi and Urdu and Persian, which all kind of do that, where they have sort of a helper verb that just makes something into a verb, and you just have like a word before it that's kind of frozen there, and together they make a verb. But really it comes from maybe a noun or adjective, the thing before the helper verb. So I could, instead of maybe having a verb that means to analyze, I could have analysis, the concept, belief, value, tradition, and then just a helper verb. And I never even need to think about having a verb meaning analyze. Or I could have, the phenomenon wind, and then instead of having a separate verb that means to blow or to be blustery or something, I would just have wind and then a helper verb. So it would be a phenomenon noun and then just a helper verb that shows that it's something happening. That's something I could do easily, and I might do that depending on what kind of verb it is. If it's a verb that has an easy sort of noun, an existing noun thing that's either a concept or a phenomenon. And the reason I come up with this is because I talked about the idea of like having run, a verb, and then running as a noun being a concept, with concepts being my general noun class for when I make verbal nouns. But I could even just not have verbs. If I want to take this very far, I could just not have verbs, have everything be a concept or phenomenon or something else, and just be able to easily verbify any noun. So anytime you have a verb, there's actually a noun class attached to it in some way. That would be really trippy, actually. If I want to say to run, I would have running, the concept, and then make it into a verb with a helping verb. To do the running, to engage in running, or instead of to get married to or to wed, I would just have marriage and then to do, like to I just verbify marriage, or to eat, I could just have food, or it would probably be more like a phenomenon, like eat. Alright, goodbye. Someone signing off. Thank you for being here. Oh wait, no. This person is not not leaving, signing off. They're giving an example. Bye, honey, I'm off to do some breathing. That's wonderful. Yeah, so instead of breath, it's to do the breathing. Yes. So having breathing, the phenomenon, and then instead of saying inhale, you would just say to do breathing, or something like that. Respire. I could go very extreme and do that. I don't think I'm going to want to do that, and that is because I tend to think more, I guess the way my mind works is that I tend to think of most roots being verbal, like to do something, and then nounifying them, even with a lot of things, even things that are clearly entities, like a plant or something, or maybe a better example would be like rain. I tend to think first of like the verb, like to descend, and having rain come from that and be sort of like matter, or in this case it would be probably a phenomenon like water falling, water descending being a phenomenon, coming from ultimately a root for to fall, or something like that. My brain just for whatever reason thinks of roots as being more verby typically. I would definitely have some roots that are very nouny, but especially when it comes to concepts, phenomena, matter, etc., I tend to think more in terms of verbs. So I probably wouldn't go that extreme with like compound verbs. Entity, action, state. But I think the main thing that makes more sense to me, the simplest thing in my brain, is to have, actions be verbs, and then you can nounify them, make them entities in that sort of concept or phenomenon class. I don't think going the other way, as interesting as it would be, I don't think it would be the most efficient way. It also doesn't help with compactness, which is one of my goals. Like having to have a helping verb and mark, the gender of the noun every time you have, a simple verb like breathing, having to mark that for phenomenon every time you want to talk about it is not, it doesn't really go with compact goal. So, but what I do want to think about is the idea of splitting adjectives between noun-like and verb-like. And Dixon, in that paper I was talking about, adjective classes in typological perspective, I think is what it was called, talked about there's sort of a hierarchy of adjectives depending on how big the language's size of adjective there are. So some languages have like a closed classed adjective system where there are very few adjectives. And what he said, and I think this is based on someone else's research, I don't remember who he cited, but what he said is that in the smallest of small closed classed adjective systems, they still distinguish between 4 categories of adjective. I think one of the languages he looked at was, oh goodness, I cannot remember the name of the language. It was a language spoken in, I want to say Nigeria. It might have actually been Yoruba. I could totally be mistaken, but it was a language spoken in that region. Might have been Yoruba or related to Yoruba, where they literally just have 4 pairs of opposites in these domains, but they still have these 4 types of adjectives. So for dimension, there is a word that means big and a word that means small. For age, there's new and old. For value, there's good and bad. And for color, there's like black and white. Really, like it can mean more than just black and white. It meant other colors as well. But that's the as minimal as you could possibly get with an adjective system. But the smallest of adjective systems differentiate between these 4 categories. So dimension, size, big, small. Age, how old or new something is. It could be young, elderly, recent, or a long time ago. Value, good, bad, mediocre. And then color, as many colors as I want there to be in this language. So I can make those decisions later when I'm actually getting to my lexicon, but if I had the very smallest number of adjectives, it would kind of be like that. And then what he says next is that in sort of medium-sized adjective systems, as you get a bit bigger, the next 3 categories that smaller languages will have is physical property, human propensity, and speed. So for physical property, he said things like, tall, short, thick, thin, heavy, light, that kind of thing. And if languages don't have these things, if they're like sort of more of this size, small, then physical properties tend to be verbs. And human propensity is the next one. And human propensity is things like joy, anger, greed, kindness, things that humans can tend to do. And these, he said, can kind of be split depending on language. Some might be nouns, some might be verbs. All of those things I think I just said were nouns in English. Kindness, greed, anger, those are all nouns in English. Other things like hunger, thirst, that kind of thing, those are nouns in English. We derive adjectives from them. We can say hungry and thirsty, but their roots are nouns. And then speed, like fast, slow. He said these tend to be adverbs in languages that don't have speed adjectives. So languages that don't have a word fast, they might have fastly or quickly, but not have a dedicated adjective root for fast. They would have to kind of derive that from an adverb or just not, or maybe have a verb that means to go quickly or something like that. So these are sort of the next in sort of this hierarchy of how common different classes of adjectives are. And then larger ones have these other ones. So like difficulty, hard, simple, complex. Similarity, how similar or different things are. Qualification, quantification, sort of more detailed values. Position, where things are located, right? In a lot of other languages, these would be like nouns or prepositions or something. And then we have numbers, cardinal and ordinal numbers might be adjectives in a bigger language. A language with more adjectives in their sort of adjective root class. So what I could do, if I were to split adjectives between inherently nouns and inherently verbs, is I could do it along these lines somewhere. And I think I kind of have an instinct that I would want these to be verbs and the others to maybe be nouns, or like inherently nouns, and I can turn both into adjectives with different strategies. So for the verbs, I could have that participle idea where I can like take a verb that means to be big or to be small, and make it mean like being small, being big, or having been small, having been big, with my different participle, with my participle marker, with different tenses and stuff. Same with age, to be new, to be old, etc. So have some that act like verbs, and then the rest properties, I might have to be tall versus height, like tallness would be if this were a noun. In English, tall is an adjective root, and then we make it into a noun by saying tallness, or height, or something like that. Human propensity, anger. Human propensities, I would probably have these be phenomenon nouns for the most part. Anger, thirst, etc. Those are all kind of conditions, which falls into the phenomenon noun class. Speed, adverb. I think that makes sense for adverbs. But the thing is, adverbs in my language are basically, for the most part, all going to be vialis nouns. Nouns in the vialis case. So I would probably have speed be a phenomenon as well. Quickness, it could be a concept. I think it depends on how you mean the speed. Like efficiency as a value, a socially valued thing. That could be a concept. So these could be concepts or values. I think it just depends on what the root is. But these would ultimately be nouns, because adverbs in my language are generally going to be nouns in the vialis case. And things like difficulty, similarity, these all feel very much like nouns to me as well. Difficulty versus simplicity, those could be like concepts as well. Oh, this is smaller font over here. Yeah, I would say like these are going to be mostly concepts. Might have some things be phenomenon. Similarity, I think that would mostly be concepts. Sameness, difference, that kind of thing. Qualification, quantification. Again, this would really depend on how detailed I'm going to get. But I would need to go into these more, think more about specific qualifications, quantifications I would want. And then position would mostly be probably geographical nouns, or just any noun in the locative. So position would be things like on, like sort of higher, lower, as adjectives, like like underneath, but as an adjective. You wouldn't really say underneath as an adjective. Far versus close, like a far away land versus a nearby, person. Those would be position. And I would probably have those just be geographic nouns, like the vicinity might be a geographic noun, or distance might be a concept, and I would just have that be a locative. Distance, like far away, would just be like location, like distance, and mark it locative case, and have like an adjectival preposition. That's actually something I was going to talk about next, the syntax of adjectives. But I want to get like the class down first. And then numbers. I'm not sure what I want to do with numbers. I know I said I wanted to have numbers be relatively easy to mark. It's especially the number 1 to be easy to like append to something or put next to it to indicate that something was a singulative singular versus a plurative. So at least the number 1, maybe the number 2 as well, to talk about pairs, be relatively easy to put. So I might have numbers be their own category. That is another thing that can happen a lot of the time, is that numbers are kind of their own unique part of speech that behave differently. But with ordinals especially, those would probably tend to be adjectives. Like have an adjective kind of thing, like first, second, third, fourth, like the 4th day, the 5th page. Day would be phenomenon. Page would be tool. I think it would go under tool, like a human-made thing. You use a page to record information. So would I want them to agree, or would I want those to be verbs? To be the first, to be the second, to be the third, etc. Or do I want to like have whatever my cardinal numbers are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, have an easy way to turn them into ordinal adjectives? Like of the number. See, that measure, which like the size of something, like, or the quantity of something at times too. Measure is something that I enveloped into my case system in the Vialis case. So, for example, being 50 feet long is a measure. So feet, like if it said 50 feet, if I want to say like this house is 50, maybe like, maybe not house, this line is 50 feet long, I would have like feet marked Vialis and have 50 be like the number on that word feet, or whatever measure word I end up using, but it would be Vialis of the line. So I have line in whatever case it is. If my sentence is literally just this line is 50 feet long, right? I would have demonstrative line. I don't know. I could have line be the topic, so I'd have like line, and it would be patientive, so no marking, as the topic, and then say, if I have a copula, the copula would go next. I'm going to talk about copula next, actually, because that impacts the adjective question. Foot, and then put 50 somewhere on this, but foot is going to be Vialis. And put 50 somewhere. And 50, what is 50 going to do is the question. Is 50 just the number floating? Is 50 an adjective that counts, like a quantitative adjective? 50-ish feet, like 50. It's, what kind of a foot is it? It's a 50 foot? I don't think so. I think 50 could just kind of float. It's counting the number of, it is indicating the number of feet, so it modifies feet somehow. So we need to mark it somewhere, and it would need to maybe agree with foot. If foot, the measure word, what class would that be? A foot in distance. Is that matter? Is that, I think that's a concept. It's a cultural construct of some kind, so I think that would go in class 1. A foot. So I think it would be concept, and then would 50 then be an adjective that agrees, like a noun-like adjective that agrees with concept, maybe? Or is it a verb? Maybe it's its own verb that means to be 50. 50 non-past Realis. Actually, I don't need to say Realis because Realis is the unmarked. Realis will be marked. Yeah, so 50 non-past. So it could be a verb, and I might want to put a participle marking on it. Participle that shows that it's, it's not the main verb of the sentence. Now, if I don't have a copula, it could be the main verb of the sentence. this adjective 50 could be an adjective like verb, Dixon would say. To be 50, and I would take off the participle. If this is my sentence, just if all the sentence is doing is saying how long it is. If it were a longer sentence, like I stepped on the 50-foot long line, then 50-foot long would still need 50 would still need to be a participle there. But if this were my sentence, I could say the line 50-foot 50s as far as feet are concerned. That's what the Vialis does. It makes feet the measure. Foot is like our tool. How is it 50ing? It's 50ing in a footwise manner, as opposed to a meter or an inch or whatever that is. So line is the topic, patientive topic. 50 would be an intransitive verb, so it's a stative verb because we've left line in the patientive, and then foot is how we're measuring that 50, like how we're quantifying that 50. Foot being a concept noun. So here, 50 is a verb-like adjective and not a noun-like adjective. Honestly, I don't hate it. I don't hate the idea that my cardinal numbers be verbs. I really don't hate it. The only issue is when we get back to the number 1, I want 1 to be really simple and really easy to put onto any noun without having to make it a participle. That would be confusing. I could have 1 be special. I could have 1 be special. That gets tricky. I could allow numbers to easily become verbs, stative verbs, with derivation, and just have them be their own number class. I might have numbers themselves. I would also want a way to distinguish to be 50 versus to be 50th. You know, back to the cardinal ordinal distinction. If a number, so if I want to say like the 50th foot, if 50th is also a verb, that could be confusing. Maybe cardinals are verbs and ordinals are nouns, like the 50th one, the 50. Or I could do the opposite. I could say a group of 50 is a noun, 60 is a noun, 70 is a noun, but 50th is a verb to be 50th, and so I wouldn't use, if I wanted to say the line is 50 feet long, I would need to say the line, copula, if I have a copula, to be, and then 50 would be a noun-like adjective, meaning, a group of 50, something, and then feet. And then I might have 50, the group of 50, be in Vialis, saying that it's a measure. But then foot is also a measure. That gets tricky. I need to think about how I want to do copulas in general before I decide on numbers, actually. Numbers are numbers. Question mark, are they their own thing? Cardinal, verb, ordinal, noun, or vice versa? That's what /VV means to me. That's my little abbreviation for that. Qualification, quantification. I think I need to go deeper into that. Now, human properties or physical properties like tall, short, wide, thin, that kind of thing. My brain tends to put these together with positions in some way, but they're different. They are indeed different. And so, I'm not quite sure how that's going to shake out. I don't think I want them to be verbs. To be tall, to be short. I mean, that could kind of also fall into dimension, too. To be big, to be small, to be thin, to be thick, to be heavy, to be light. That's a little bit different than dimension. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm starting to think that maybe I'm not ready to talk about adjectives yet, despite where I put this on the agenda. Because we've talked about nouns and verbs, I wanted to talk about adjectives. But the reason I wanted to talk about adjectives is because I know the next thing I want to talk about is adjective clauses and noun clauses, like subordination. I wanted to talk about that. So I wanted to talk about adjectives first before I talked about adjective clauses. But I think maybe I'm not ready to talk about that yet, because I need to figure out more how my declension is going to work and how my clauses are going to work before I decide what adjectives are going to be. So I think I'm glad I did this. I'm glad I figured this out, or like thought through this, because I don't think I'm ready for adjectives to be decided yet. So what I think I'm going to do on my agenda is I'm going to go ahead and say adjectives 1 here. And then once I figure out declension and stuff, and conjugation, actually it'll go between declension and conjugation, I'm going to do an adjectives 2. Yeah. So that's adjectives 1 done. And now I think this is a good place to take a break. I need to go check on my dog. So I will be gone for about, I want to say 3 minutes. So I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back, 3 minutes. And then we will continue on and talk about adjective clauses. So we're going to go back to syntax then. So thank you for everyone who's in the chat. I'm still working on what my sort of in-between waiting for stream to resume kind of thing is going to be. There will be kind of a better slideshow kind of thing going on soon. I'm still figuring that out. I'm new to Twitch. So thank you for putting up with this little makeshift be right back screen for now. But yes, I'll be right back in 3 minutes. All right. right, I have returned. Oh, thank you. Yeah, my dog's name is Seamus, and someone in the chat is saying that I should tell Seamus Woof. Well, Seamus is actually here. He followed me in here, so he's licking my arm right now. So hello, Seamus says hello. Maybe on one of our Yester Lore streams, I'll have Seamus be present, because I actually share my camera for that one. So some of you might get to see Seamus. All right, hello. He just likes attention, so I just need to make sure he is okay, but also not, whining during the stream, which happens sometimes. That happened last time, or last conlang with me at least. So, all right, we're gonna go ahead and get back into things. So, we talked about why I can't really choose right now how I want adjectives to be in general. I might split adjectives between verbs and nouns. I might have unique adjectives, maybe just unique numbers, but everything else is split, or might have everything be a noun. Red the color might be a phenomenon. I think I did discuss that option before of having colors be phenomenon, in which case even colors would be nouns. And I might just have all adjectives be nouns and have an easy way to verbify them. Maybe with that helper verb idea that I was talking about with concepts and stuff. I might do that with actually, the more I think about that, the more I like it. Dimension being a concept. Maybe like bigness being a concept, and then I make that into a verb. Oldness, newness being a concept. Goodness, badness, those are values. And that allows me to have a lot more than just goodness and badness as verbs, and just have whatever the culture values be the word, the cultural value. That would be in the concept gender or concept class, and then colors being phenomenon. Actually, the more I think about it, the more I like that. So I think what I'm doing now, after having this long discussion, even though I really like the idea of participles being how I do adjectives, I can still get the cool active stative thing if, red is a noun. Let's say red is a phenomenon, right? But I want to differentiate between, like, what I was talking about before. The house is red versus Z reddens. Someone makes someone blush or something. I could just make it a verb. Like, whatever I use, whatever strategy I use to make something into a verb, that will apply to both. So, red, phenomenon, and then maybe I have a verbifier. And I can mark that, for tense aspect mood or something, and then verbifier. That essentially, though, kind of makes it a copula, the verbifier, in that kind of a way. To be read versus to do read, the difference between be and do is not in the copula, it's in the case that accompanies the copula. So that kind of is like having a copula. So maybe I do want a copula. The reason I was hesitant about a copula is because of my active stative system. I tend to not like having copulas in languages that are active stative because you could just say that something is something by having it be the state it's in. So I could say, instead of saying like, she is a teacher, like let's say that's my sentence, I would have, teacher, whatever teacher is, that would be, and that would be like a human noun if it were a noun. But if I could turn it into a verb, so like it's human, if I could verbify it, verb, and then this would be non-past, is a teacher, and then I would have, she, which would just be like a human demonstrative, so like that human, so third person or demonstrative because they're the same in this language. So I'll just say third person, human, and it'll be count because there's one of her. It's not a whole mass of her. So this would be like she is a teacher, and so I have to, I'd have some kind of verbifier, and then it's a stative verb because third person human count is a patient. Whereas if I made third person human count, I think I've been saying singulative instead of count, just in my glossing singulative, yeah. If I said third person human singulative agentive, that would mean like she makes someone a teacher. She teacherifies someone. And I might have like another person there in the patientive, or I might not. Or I can make it reflexive and be like, she becomes a teacher. She like turns herself into a teacher. She becomes a teacher. Also, there's no human, there's no social gender here. I'm just choosing she arbitrarily. It could be he, it could be they. All we know about the person is that they're a human and that there's a countable number of them. So I think my default for humans, at least when it's singulative, is going to be one countable human. And if it's multiple, I can just add numbers to it. That's why I wanted my numbers to be relatively simple. So that was my idea, is I could, take a noun, make it a stative verb by verbifying it, and then having, the case of what's with it, indicating whether it's copular, like if it's saying X equals Y, or if saying it's more active, like X is doing Y. And that's kind of the benefit of having active, or one of the many benefits of having active stative fluid S alignment. However, I could just have adjectives. See, I'm just explaining why I was not thinking about having a copula. Having a verbifier, the verbifier is kind of like my replacement for having a copula. I could just not have a verbifier and not have a copula. And I could just have two nouns next to each other, like two patientive nouns. Teacher, human, third person human, singulative. Human, the teacher would probably also be singulative if it were just a noun instead of a verb. So it would just be like teacher, she teacher, and that would just mean she is a teacher. The issue here, though, is that I would not be able to express tense, aspect, mood, providentiality. So I can't say like she might be a teacher or she would be a teacher. If I wanted to do that, I would want a copula or a verbifier. Those are my two ideas. Well, verbifier lets the active stative do all the work of making it a copula versus not. But actually, if I have a copula, the active and stative still applies. It would just be the copula when it's stative would be an equative copula to be X. And if it's active, it could be an inchoative or an active copula, like to become X or to do X, depending on whether the verb is, if I have a reflexive or not, maybe. I should probably talk about reflexives with my pronouns. I might have to go back to pronouns eventually. When I talk about verb classes or something. So yeah, the downside of just doing this, having verbless clauses, which I do generally like verbless clauses in languages, the downside of this is it's not really clear when this is occurring, or if it's real or not, or how I know. Like, I'm not saying whether it's a primary or secondary source. How do I know she's a teacher? Do I know her and know that she's a teacher primarily? Do I have a primary source telling me she's a teacher? Or do I have a secondary source telling me she's a teacher? So I don't know any of that information if I just have a verbless clause. As much as I like verbless clauses, and as okay as I could be with it in another language, I really like when languages just kind of leave it vague with copulas. For the purposes of this language, where I want to be detailed and compact with information, but still have detailed information about humanities, I would want to know that kind of information if I'm making an assertion like this. If I want to say, like, this person was, the monarch of this country from this year to this year, I want to say whether or not I know that from a primary source or not. So I don't think I want null copula. So I guess the question is, do I want a copula that could be active or stative, depending on the alignment of the sentence, or do I want a verbifier? I think the easier choice is to just have a copula. Honestly, I think I'm just going to have a copula, and that solves that. And so back to the adjective question then. If I have a copula, I could still make the red house red, redifying person distinction, I could say. Copula, mark it for tense aspect, whatever. Red phenomenon. A red is a phenomenon as a noun. And then I have... this has different implications now. If red is purely a noun, red, this is like the phenomenon of redness, like red as it exists in the world. And I want to say the house, right? House, which is a geographic, like it's a place. Actually, I'm not sure if house would be a place. It could be a tool. I want to think more about my noun classes. Like I've been saying, I'm second guessing some of my noun class choices, or at least what counts in each noun class choice, because I think I said that like room 12 is geographic, it's a place, so it would be geographic. I think my issue now is becoming like, I was thinking about merging geographic and matter, but I don't think that makes much sense now that I think about it. But I'm also thinking about whether or not I want a place to be distinguishing whether it's a man-made place or not. I want to think more about that. Again, I'll get back to that when we talk about declensions. I'll think more clearly about that then. Now, the problem with saying this is that this is really saying, if these are both patientive, this would be saying that the house is the color red. Or that's one possible way I can interpret it when I'm having red be a noun. Probably one of these two would be the topic. I'd probably have house be the topic, in which case it would come before the copula. Or if the color is the topic, then red would come first. And this is why a verbifier appealed to me, because you don't have that issue of saying the house is redness versus the house is red. Like if I want to say like the rock is my friend, for example, rock might be matter, but friend might be human. This might come up in like a fable or myth or something when I'm talking about folklore. So I would want to distinguish that between saying like my rock is the rock is friendly, which is, you know, an adjective, a predicate adjective. So that's the issue here. If adjectives are purely nouns. Which is why I like the idea of a verbifier, which doesn't really tell you what, gender, what noun class it is. It's just like red verb with its cases, or not cases, tenses and stuff. House, geog, right? It's, the location that is the house is red. That's what it is, and it's patientive, so it's in that state of being red, or someone made it red. Either way, it would be patientive. So I think I prefer that. And same with like to be friendly. Friendliness, that friendship is a concept. So I wouldn't want to say like, if I had the noun friendliness or friendship be just a noun and had copula, I want to say like the rock is friendly, or maybe this person is friendly. This person isn't friendliness. They are not friendship. They are friendly. So then I would want friendly to be a verb, right? Friendly, or friendly, verb, person's name. As opposed to the person is friendship. Of course, I could just have that be interpreted as this person is friendly, even though it's marked as, a concept. I could do that. I could have different copulae. I could have like an equative copula versus a qualitative copula. But then it gets kind of redundant. Like, what's the difference between making an equative copula active versus a qualitative copula active? If my equative becomes an active, like this person is friendship versus this person causes friendship, how is it different from this person is friendly, this person causes friendly, this person does friendly? That could be distinct, but it seems really strange. It seems like a weird thing to do. So now I'm back to maybe adjectives to just be verbs. They should be verb roots, and you can, nounify them by giving them a class, a noun class. So I could have sort of a root that sort of means friend as a verb root, to friend, like to be a friend, to be friendly, etc. And if it's stative, it's going to mean to be friendly or be a friend. And then if it's active, it's like to act friendly towards someone. Where someone would be the recipient. And if you want to make someone into a friend, then you have them be a patient of an active verb. So you'd say, if I turn you into a friend, if I make you friendly, then I would say, I'm the agent, friend is the active verb, and then you are the patient. Whereas if I say, I am friendly towards you, I would be still active, I'm still doing something, I'm behaving in a certain way, actively, so I would be the agent, friend would be the verb, but you would be the recipient of my actions. You wouldn't really be, I'm not doing something to you, I'm doing something for you. You're receiving it. So again, the cases would make that distinction. I wouldn't need separate verbs. And then to say, a friend, I just take the root friend, which is a verb root, and make it into a human noun. That would be a person who's a friend. And if I want to say friendship, I want that to be a value, I'd make it a concept. And maybe we can imagine some kind of way that we could make it into a food, or if I make friend into a non-human animal, that could be a pet, would be a friend. Friend animal. And if I make it, I don't know, a supernatural entity, it could be like a ghost that you're a companion with, or maybe it's a deity that someone is working with, depending on their religion. That could be a thing. And that would be actually useful, like a companion spirit or something. Even substances might be able to be friends, potentially. It might have different connotations depending on the noun class. So this brings me back to this idea that I think the thing that would be the most efficient is that most roots, even things that seem very noun-like friend, the roots would ultimately be verbs that mean to be that thing for most things. Because then they can act as active or stative verbs easily, and then all these noun markers, for the most part, would be derivational. So you add something to the root to make it into one of these kinds of nouns. So even like person, like it could have the root as, you could use it as a verb meaning to be human, to be a homo sapien, or, to be part of the human species. And then, you can have humanity be a concept. You might have human noun, that's person, right? Person or people, depending on if it's mass or collective or singulative. I don't know, it could be redundant for certain things. I don't think every verb root can make sense as every noun class, but there would be a lot that would make sense. So if we take human and make it a location, it could be, a settlement where people live would be human location, just near humans. Human flora, not sure. Maybe since I'm mostly working with anthropology and folklore and linguistics, maybe just the words for a lot of these things would be based on the human root. So like the root for human, and then add it to tool, that could mean a man-made tool. Food, that would just be social food. It could just mean social, especially because collective is the default interpretation of nouns. It could just mean social. So like society, right? Humanity, society. Human emotions. I don't know. For substances, I don't know. The body. I don't know. The human body could be matter. Physical body. Tools. Social foods. Social gathering of food. Eating food. Settlement. Town, city, something like that. I don't know. Maybe horticulture or agriculture, if you take human and make it flora. I'm not sure how that's gonna shake out. But domestication, if you take human and make it fauna. I'm not sure yet, but we can kind of see how those roots will shake out. But I think maybe if I don't use something like human, maybe I use something like if I have a root that means to be or gosh, I'm struggling to come up with examples. Like I always say, I'm very bad at coming up with examples on the spot. But hopefully, it's clear what I mean when I say having verb roots that can then be the source of a lot of these nouns feels more efficient to me, at least. More efficient and more productive in terms of like being able to produce more words with fewer roots than going the other way around and having separate roots for a lot of materials, tools, flora, fauna. I mean, for some things it's going to be mostly like, if I wanted a word for fir tree, I don't know how productive it is to have a root that means to be a fir tree that you can then make all these other things. So there definitely will be some, I think, words that make sense to be ultimately nouns, like noun roots. I think that makes sense in my mind to have things that, especially very specific roots, like this person's name. I don't need that to be a verb root. I can make a verb out of it, like to be Harold Godwinson. But I think even in those cases, for the most part, I think I want the gender, the noun class, to be explicit on the word with some kind of derivational affix, or at least the form of affixes that they take when you decline them for like number and case. So maybe even for things like that, I then take off whatever marking makes it that class to make it a verb. And it's still like verbs are ultimately what the bare root is. And the bare root, if there is no like, if unmarked ends up being a zero marking, then the roots will be by default mean that something was the case for a specific time, like it happened. Maybe if that's the case though, maybe my imperfective will be the default for that kind of thing. Like to be Harold Godwinson. To have been Harold Godwinson is imperfective. You're not usually Harold Godwinson. You don't usually do Harold Godwinsoning and then stop it. It's not something that happens at a point in time. It's something that goes on. So maybe if that's how I'm doing things, I might rethink having the perfective be the default. I might have the imperfective be the default. We'll see. When I come back to actually doing the conjugation, I'll think through the ramifications of doing both. But in any case, I think having things for the most part be verbs might actually make sense. This is tricky because, yeah, the alignment is kind of pushing me towards generally wanting adjectives to be verb-like in general. even though like some of them might seem like they're inherently phenomena, like colors are phenomena. So like why have it be a verb? Same with like goodness, badness. Those seem like concepts, like societal values that make sense to be in that noun class. But, I could easily have it be a verb root, but then make it a value easily with the concept gender, but have the flexibility then to make it something else, like have it be a good phenomenon or a good substance or a good person or something like that, a good human. I can make goodness a human, how it'd be like a person who exemplifies good, maybe a role model might be you take whatever the word for good is and make it human gender. That verb root for good, you make it human gender, and that means like maybe like the exemplar of a good person or something. I could do really creative things with that. So I think even though a lot of these things do seem like they would be nouns, ultimately, they might tend to be nouns in a certain class, but there's still the flexibility that they don't have to be, and ultimately be verbs that I can make active or stative easily, rather than going the inverse, the reverse, and having, anger be a phenomenon that I then have to verbify, and have that kind of copula issue. I have just it be detachable rather than inherent to the word. So that will be something to think about when I do my declension, is that I want the declensions, like the noun classes, to be derivational and clearly detachable in order to make something a verb. So I think I'll just say that for now. We can say farewell to these linguists here. I'll just delete this just so I can make it look nice. I think we're going to say, for now, well, it's just taking a moment. I just did something big. I think we're going to say for now, I will just write that I'm leaning towards having things be verbs, like roots for things that would generally be adjectives be verbs, and I can easily make them into, wow, it's really not getting rid of the rows, is it? Oh, it didn't actually register that I said get rid of the rows. Okay. Oh, the pictures are still there. Okay, farewell, you two. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of these columns too. So the more columns and rows I have, the slower Google Sheets does things. So I'm gonna keep these here just to be my ideas for what they would generally be. I think propensities would probably also be concepts or phenomena, and then colors would be phenomena, values would be concepts, age would probably be phenomena, like newness, oldness, I don't know, that would be like a condition, and then dimension, bigness, smallness, thickness, thinness. That's kind of difficult. I think it leans towards concept and not phenomena. But in general, I'm going to have adjectives lean verb words. Verb, most roots, verbs just in general. It's just like a general part of speech thing, is that most roots are going to be verbs. And then they can easily become these things, and these are kind of like the stereotypical noun classes that they would be when they're not the predicate, when they're not, if you're, rather than saying it's, like if you're just saying this thing is big, you'll use the verb to be big. But, if you're saying, if you have a longer sentence like, oh, it's important that you know that the smallness of this house is unimportant, or something like that. Smallness would be a concept, probably, most likely. Whereas red, in this culture, red phenomenon has that connotation of blah, 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 blah. If you're talking about, color associations in different cultures, if I'm doing some kind of anthropological or folklore kind of thing. Just knowing that these are, the general things will fall into when they're not what the verb is. And then the remaining question then is, if adjectives are mostly verbs, if they are describing something in a sentence that is not, without being the verb, so if I want to just have a larger sentence, like, I ate the blue cake, if I want to describe cake as blue, the question is then, do I have the verb root blue, and then say, the cake which is blue, in which case I have, an adjective clause, a relative clause, or I can mark it as a participle, the being blue cake, the bluing cake, or do I have blue as a special, do I have a special adjective class that will agree with the gender of cake? So cake is food, then I'd have my blue verb root, and then say blue food, cake food, or food, or cake food, blue food, depending on what order I put my heads and modifiers in. Haven't decided on that yet, syntax-wise. And I think that is going to depend on my decisions with syntax. So the next thing on my agenda was adjective clauses. So I don't know things about order yet. I'll talk about noun clauses next. I actually made a little decision about noun clauses already when I was talking about cases, and I'll remind myself and anyone in chat what that was when we get to noun clauses, but I want to talk about adjective clauses first. So what's an adjective clause? An adjective clause is what we usually call a relative clause. It's a kind of relative clause, at least. And it's what we do when we describe something, an argument in the sentence, so usually a noun, with another clause. So if I want to say something like, so I'm just trying to merge some cells so I have some wider cells to go in, because I tend to have, my formatting be that it wraps, because I usually prefer that over it, text going over the line. But the downside of that is then it ruins the readout of things, which is why I like to merge the cells so I can still have a long thing without disturbing the width of all these. All right, so I just merged some columns here. So if I have a sentence like let's think of something I might write in history. Let's say I want to say again, I'm notoriously bad at coming up with examples. Maybe someone in chat can help me. It is someone in chat who knows how relative clauses work. Does someone want to give me a sentence with a relative clause? Or maybe just a description of something. In the meantime, I'll still try to think of something. Maybe on the theme of cake, let's do names. Let's say Leo. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's a good one. Thank you. Thank you. Someone in the chat said, the woman I saw was sad. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's a very good example. And this is an example of an adjective clause which describes, so I'll say what the adjective clause is. The adjective clause here is I saw, And in English, we could just say the woman I saw. We could also say the woman who I saw, or whom I saw, or that I saw. And the reason it's whom, if you're being super formal, is that M is indicating that the woman is the patient, in English at least, is the direct object of C here. In this language, at least, she would be marked patientive. If a woman was here, I saw the woman, she would... So we're kind of combining two sentences here. We have I saw the woman was sad. But we're saying it all in one sentence. We're getting rid of the woman because that's redundant, in English at least, to have the woman twice. So the woman I saw was sad. The woman whom I saw was sad. The woman is the one who I saw. So I, in this relative clause, is the seer. In this language, it would be the experiencer. I'd mark them experiencer because C is more of like a cognitive thing. If it was the woman I looked at, then it would be agentive I. But the thing that matters is that I saw describes the woman. We're saying which woman it is. So the woman I saw as opposed to a woman who I didn't see. So in either case, I saw describes the woman. So in this language, sad. So I was just talking about emotions. A sadness is a phenomenon in this language. That would be a phenomenal noun. But if I have adjectives be verbs, then I'd have like sad, like to be sad is my verb, or to sadden if it's active. But here, was sad is copular in English, so it would be stative, being in the state of sad. Sad, and it would be perfective past, or actually no, this wouldn't be perfect. This would be imperfective. Imperfective past. And if I saw her, then I'm the source, so it's primary. I don't need to mark it for secondary. I mean, it could be that I saw her, but I didn't see her be sad, and the fact that she was sad was reported to me, in which case, or I read that she happened to be sad after I saw her. So we're not entirely clear on what the evidentiality is here, but I'm going to leave it unmarked for now. I'm going to assume I know that she was sad. So the woman, so sad, and then we'd have the woman. So we'd have woman. I don't know if I'm going to have definiteness in this language yet, so I'm just going to proceed without it for now. Woman, and then I want to mark that I saw her somehow, and have the fact that I saw her be a description on woman. So it would be an adjective clause. So I saw her, like I saw the woman, is an adjective which describes woman. However, it's also a clause. It could be a sentence. I saw the woman is a sentence. And I'm just getting rid of the extra woman because woman is already in the sentence here. Now, some languages might have a resumptive pronoun inside of the clause to say, I saw her, the woman. So the woman was sad, I saw her, and have the her in the sentence, even though her and woman are the same person. That's a thing I could do. There are a lot of other options I can do. I don't want to go through all of them today, but because I already have a sort of an idea of what I want to do here. Really, it's a question of, do I want a special marker for the fact that this clause is relative to woman, that says that it is behaving as an adjective clause? Do I want to use a word order? Because the other issue here is that I have another argument here. I have I, and I would be an experiencer here. And I wouldn't want it to get confused as an argument of the verb sad, if sad is a verb. So if I have, let's say my word order is that I have relative clauses come after the nouns that they describe. Let's say I have it after, and I just start with the verb again, and I say saw, and that happened at one point in time, so it's going to be perfective, and it's going to be C, unmarked for perfective, and then primary, because I saw her, I know the fact that I saw her, I'm the source of that information, and then I'd have I, or I have like first person, count, first person singulative, in the dative for experiencer, right? So what I have is I have two verbs, sad, imperfective, woman, see, first person singulative, dative. So I have two things that could be sentences here, like I saw and woman was sad. But I don't want it to be interpreted as like I saw that the woman was sad. The woman being sad would then be a noun clause, and we'll get to noun clauses next. But no, the woman was sad, I saw, by itself here. I want a way to know that I saw describes the woman. And I could just have the word order tell me that. I could just say, whatever comes right after woman, that is a description of woman. Now, if I did a different order, I wouldn't want a situation where I would be confused about what the I is doing. So, the page is going slow, that's great. Okay, let's say I put it before. Whoa. Yeah, I think the page was really lagging, and so it just registered a lot of changes I made at once. Oh, no. Stop. There we go. Let's say I put it before, because I want to think about the relative merits of putting it before or after. We have, so if I have like sad, imperfective, and then I have the adjective come before, the adjective clause at least come before, I could have first singulative, dative, because I'm the subject of I saw, so I could be a topic there, and then I have see after. Woman. Who is sad? I saw her a woman. I saw a woman. I want to put the relative clause in brackets here too. Now, if I had this situation, my fear, and the reason I wouldn't want to put it in this order, is because we could, if there's nothing to tell us that this is bracketed in some way, then it could be misinterpreted with like, the woman was sad to me, and how do we interpret see there? That could make it unambiguous, but it's just kind of messy, in my opinion, given that I'm going to tend to have the verb come first. Now, if, woman is probably the topic here, so in practice, woman would probably come first, and it would be more like woman, see, first singulative. I'll just put S for singulative for now. First singulative dative. Sad, since my topics are coming first. It's really lagging right now. Sorry. I think I need to clear my cache after this. Okay, and then here, it would probably also have the similar thing happening where both I saw, and woman would come before sad, because woman is the topic in practice. But if woman weren't the topic, for example, it could get really confusing if we have a longer sentence. Like, the mail carrier gave the package to the woman I saw. Or even to the sad woman I saw. That would be extra confusing. If it were the sad woman I saw, sad and saw are both verbs in this language. The woman who was being sad and the woman I saw would be like you have two relative clauses there. So I think I like the idea of having the relative clauses come after just in general, because it makes it a little less ambiguous. Just given that the verb is usually at the beginning of the clause, except for accepting the topic. So woman was seen to me was being sad would be the order there. I don't want this order, I think. But it would still maybe be nice to have a way to tell that a relative clause is relative. And one way to do that is I could use participles again. I could do a participle thing where I mark in some way that C is a participle. So like being like seeing, and just the fact that the first person is an experiencer marks that like she was the object of that. I don't really actually have a way that I'm directly marking that the woman was the seen person in the sentence, at least. A resumptive pronoun would help with that. I would have like human, like third person human patient if I had a pronoun here. Unmarked patient, 0 marked patient. So that would clarify it if I said like see and then human, like 3 human, to show that this person, is who I saw. Because if I go ahead and make see, like seen, a participle or something, the issue is dative. At least in this example, it's extra an issue because dative is also how I'm marking alienable possession. So it'd be like my seen woman. Without some explicit marker that, she is who I saw. It could get really confusing in some instances. Not necessarily here. You could probably use context to figure this out. But in some other cases, it could get confusing. So having some kind of way to tell that this all describes what happened to her as a way that I'm describing her, like differentiating her from someone else. So I could do this with a relative subordinator. Like I could have like a subordinator marker or something. Or instead of a participle, I could have a subordinator in lieu of a participle. Like I could have a participle marker for like qualitative adjectives, and then I could have a subordinator marker for like more active relative clauses like this. Because the issue that's going on here is that we could have relative clauses where the one that's being described, the head, in this case the head is woman, is the patient inside. That's what's going on here. Whereas we could also have one where the woman is an agent. So we could say like the woman who saw me, or even just like the woman who left was sad. So in both of those cases, whether she saw me, where there's like another argument, or if there is no argument and it's intransitive, in both of those cases, woman is, well, in one case, actually it's different in this language. Actually, there's a difference between those two because of its active stativeness. In one, I'll just actually write both of these out now that I'm thinking about this. The woman who saw me would look like this. Woman see, and then first singular patientive. If we wanted a resumptive pronoun, it would be like the third person human would be in the dative. Like the woman I was seen to her. Sad, imperfective. Like the woman who saw me was sad, and then the woman who left would be woman. Well, woman. Why is it italicized? That's weird. Okay, woman leave, and I think leave could be patientive or agentive. I think I'm going to make it patientive just because, or agentive because it's like you choose to leave. Leave, sad, imperfective. In which case, woman is patientive of be sad, but is agentive of leave. So I wouldn't really have a way to mark. Just like I don't have, without a resumptive pronoun, I'm not saying that she's the experiencer of see. I'm saying woman, I was seen. And just using a prayer or context to tell that she's the experiencer of see. Whereas woman leave, again, using context to assume that she's the agent of see. So there's no way to mark the relative agency of, like, the relative active or passiveness, or not active or passive, active or stativeness of the subordinated verb unless I have a resumptive pronoun. So maybe I need a pronoun. And if we could do a resumptive pronoun, or I could have a relative pronoun, which is what English optionally does when you have an animate or even inanimate agent or patient. If you have something else, you need a relative pronoun. But like, for example, the woman whom I saw, whom is a relative pronoun. And I think I said when I was talking about pronouns, I might not need relative pronouns, but I think I might actually need relative pronouns. Just when it's not like a single qualitative adjective. Or maybe I'll say it better as when the head, in this case woman, is something other than the patient of the verb, I need a because patient is 0 marked. If the woman is anything else in the sentence, I need a relative pronoun. So woman, she saw me, so I'd need a relative pronoun that's like relative, which could just be the same as the third person. That might be tricky though. Oh, let's say relative. Relative, human, and here she'd be dative, right? Because she saw me. Experiencer. And then here, relative, human, agentive, because she left, she chose to leave. So instead of having a resumptive pronoun here to say like the woman I saw, I would have a relative pronoun. I'm just abbreviating dative here. Relative, human, no marking because she's the patient here. I saw her, right? So the woman I saw was sad, with no participle marking because they have a relative pronoun. The woman whom I saw was sad. The woman, or like I guess the woman who was seen to me because she's patient, I'm dative here. The woman who saw me, or to whom I was seen here. And then the woman who actively chose to leave was sad. Now, what I'm thinking is I could have a situation where I just make this relative optional, or just not even have it as an option at all, and just have it be, if there's nothing here, then it's patient, because the woman is going to be the same case as this. The woman could also be a different case, though, is the thing. It could have a different sentence. But just if I'm describing a noun with a clause wherein it is the patient, then it's fine. Like the woman I saw was sad. In I saw, woman is the patient, so we don't need a relative marker. But in other situations, like where she is the agent, or she's the experiencer, or maybe she's like the location or something, then we would need a relative pronoun. So we could do that. So then that brings me back to the question of how many pronouns I want, because would the pronouns need to mark the gender, the noun class? That could be a lot. That could be like a little bit too much to handle. Like I already have a plethora of pronouns. Could I do a thing like I did with the interrogative indefinite, where I just have a marker that turns a third person pronoun into a relative pronoun, like a relativizer? I could do that. In some conlangs, I've actually had the relativizer and the indefinite interrogative be the same because they were more minimalistic and that made sense. But given how much I want this to be detailed, I would probably not do that. So I could have like rel 3 human and rel 3 human here. So just a relativizer, like I have a interrogativizer on pronouns. So if I go to pronouns over here, I'll make this look nice once I make more decisions about the merginess. I could do a similar thing to this, where I do relative. So yeah, my decision that I probably wouldn't need, or my idea that I probably wouldn't need relative before when I was talking about pronouns last time was probably premature, because I hadn't thought this through yet. So yeah, I probably will need a relativizer, or that might be useful. Now, let's talk about noun clauses, because the noun clauses might actually change my opinion on this issue. So let's keep this here for now to think about it. I think I do want relative clauses to come after. And given that relative clauses are coming after their head, I think I kind of want adjectives also to come after, especially if adjectives are also verbs. So like the woman who is red. And again, if she's red, she's the patient, so we don't need any kind of marking necessarily. So the woman who reds is, so I could say like woman well, red, sad. The woman who's red is sad. Is what this would mean. The red woman is sad, or the woman who's red is sad. Let's do a different color. The woman who's pink, maybe. And then maybe I don't even need participles if this is my case. If I have relative pronouns, I don't need participles. I would just use a relative pronoun if them being the adjective is not, it's not stative. Because I indicate stative by having it be patientive, and if patientive is unmarked, then that's just an unmarked relative clause. I do want to really quickly put the translation of these real quick. Sorry, I'm merging a bunch of cells over here too. Okay. Yes, this would be the woman whom I saw was sad. Oh no, this is just the first sentence that I have here. This is redundant. Okay. Let's bring all this up. Things are laggy right now because I think I need to clear my cache. This is the woman who saw me was sad. The woman who left was sad. The pink woman was sad. Okay. Thanks, chat, for giving me this sentence too. Okay. Let's see. So we have Oh yeah, noun clauses. So let's look at some noun clauses. Yeah. Oh, and this would be the case for also like other kinds of adjectives like states, like the woman who was tall, the tall woman. Those would be the same. The woman who was tall and the tall woman would be the same. This would be like verby adjectives is what this would mean. Okay. Next, so let's do a noun clause. So, let's do a sentence that means this. Oh wait, no, I need to copy this formatting down over here too. Come on. There we go. Okay. Right. Did it work? Okay. So, this room is where I sleep. I forgot. I don't want to capitalize the letter I here. Just an aesthetic thing. Okay, this room is where I sleep. Okay, so here, I sleep. In English, we use a WH word as like a relative pronoun here. We say this woman, or sorry, not this woman. We're saying here we're doing a noun clause. So this room is where I sleep. So here it's a copular one. Actually, let's not have it be a copula. Actually, let's do both just to see how it would work as a copula. Let's say, I will take you to the room where I sleep. Like maybe I'm going to show you. Actually, yeah. No, I'll take you to the room where I sleep, like as if I'm going to like show you around my house or something. So let's start with this second one, even though it looks a little bit more complicated. So our verb is take. And let's say that the room where I sleep is not the topic. Let's say I'm the topic. So first I'll do this, then I'll do something else. So let's say I is the topic, so we're going to do one singular. Our verb is take, and it's going to be non-past, because it's in the future. I might have an extra marker that says that it's the future, not the present, but futures are going to be rare in this language anyway. So I'm going to stick with just non-past for now. Take. You is the patient, because that's who I'm taking. So it's going to be second singulative. And then, let's see. To the room where I sleep. Okay, actually having the room here complicates things, because now where I sleep is an adjective clause. I mean, let me take you to where I sleep. Or let me take you whither I sleep. If we're getting more archaic. To where I sleep. So we have the, whoa, stop it. We have where I sleep is our noun clause. And it's a noun clause because it is an argument of take. And it's the place where I'm taking you. It's the goal of movement, in which case it is going to be dative. Because it's a noun. Where I sleep is a place. So it's dative. I might even need to mark it as a noun, dative. Now, because I have relative pronouns here, I could have relative pronouns as not just adjectival, but as nominal as well, and have them be like, so this would be like relativized third person geographic dative. So I would have like, what I could do here to do this is I would have third, so relative pronoun, third person geographic, and then first person singulative sleep. And I think I am the topic of sleep. I'm going to say that anything that's not the topic of the main thing is going to come after still. So, yeah. So, but I'm patientive because I sleep there. I could be agentive if I wanted to, like where I actively choose to go to sleep versus where I am asleep or would be asleep. It's gnomic, actually, probably, so it's going to be non-past. I'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I tend to sleep, generally, not just in the past. So yeah, I sleep. This is the room where I sleep. Let's say it's patientive for now. I don't really need to mark that I'm doing something. And then what I'll do to show that this whole thing is a noun clause is I'll mark the geographic for dative. And what that does is it turns everything after it. The relativization makes this all into a relative clause. But the dative marks what role it has overall in the sentence. Now this is a bit different than what these relative pronouns we're doing, because these relative pronouns are saying what role the head has in the clause. So, like, for example, in she saw me, like, who saw me, the woman is dative in that sentence because she's the experiencer. Whereas here, I sleep, like, the geographic noun here, like there, or where, because it's relative now, isn't the dative of sleep. It's not like the goal of sleep, it's the goal of take. So it has a bit of a different relationship to, it has a bit of a different relationship to the matrix clause, the overall clause, where we have the verb take, than it does to sleep. And if I use the same kind of pronoun, if I use this relative, that could get confusing, potentially. It might not ever be confusing, but grammatically it's weird. Because really, it's the location of sleep. It's where I sleep. But it is, the whole clause is the dative of, is the dative of take. And that, I think, is why it was my instinct when I was thinking about this to say the room where I sleep. That, and also I already used room here. Because room is the dative of sleep. Because all of this, where I sleep, this all could just describe the word room. If room were in the sentence, then where I sleep would be an adjective clause describing room. But we don't have an adjective clause anymore. We have a noun clause that means, that basically is standing in place of the room. So in a way, we have, this is all kind of replacing the noun room. We could have a third geographical place, which is the location, but it would be dative of take. So it would be dative, not take, dative, and then relative, locative, location, sleep. Two relative pronouns. And now actually this is something that Old English would occasionally do, where you'd have one pronoun, which usually was just kind of unmarked, but it could be kind of any pronoun for any case that it had on the matrix clause, and then you'd have a pronoun for what it is in the subordinate clause. But usually, I think it was usually this one that was just kind of an empty one. It would just be like which. It was the. So this would be like thumb, the. So thumb is like dative, and then the would just be relativizer, which in this case, if we were to mark it on this language, would be locative of where I sleep. So having two relative pronouns isn't impossible. It's a thing real languages do. It's not a thing I necessarily want to, though. So, but see here, it's place, where. I'll take you to where? I'll take you to that place wherein I sleep. Relative, third, geographic, locative, again, is what I'm really doing. I'll take you to the place, that place, or I could just have the noun room, and room would be dative, and then this would be a relative clause describing the room where I sleep. That's just very clunky. And so I would like a way to express noun clauses without the need for either two pronouns, or which will often be repeated just with different cases. Like often I think the gender will always be the same. Let me show you who I met yesterday. Let me show you she, who I met yesterday. Let me show you the one, the person, human, who, relative, I met yesterday, whom I met yesterday. So it would just be the same two pronouns, but one will be relative and marked for a different case than the prior one. And this seems totally in contradiction with my goal of being compact. I would like a way, honestly, even having this situation doesn't feel as compact as it could be. I feel like there could be other ways to do this. I just don't have a good solution off the top of my head right now. I could think about this more between sessions. But for now, this seems like the clearest, because the other goal is being clear, being detailed, not having it be super vague all the time. So, as non-compact as this could feel, it could be more clear. But this is kind of overkill at this point. You either are requiring a noun that isn't a noun clause in order for you to have a noun clause. So everything has to be a relative clause, and you have to have a head noun. Yeah, because I need a way to mark what role the clause has in the sentence. I need a way to mark what role the clause has in the sentence, not just what the relative pronoun has in the sentence. I could even just not have... No, I can't really. Per my rules up here, I can't have this be nothing, because I am the patient of sleep, not the location. The geographical location isn't what's asleep. This is the asleep room. No. This is the I sleep. I mean, it is the I sleep room, but it isn't the asleep room. It's the room in which I sleep, in which case they would be relative location, which is what in which is getting across in English. And what where gets across in English as well. But we can also just have where sitting there with no thing, because where we allow relative clauses to do both, because we have this preposition to, which marks that where I sleep is the goal. But in this language we have cases marking it. So where kind of needs to either do both jobs, or we need two wheres. We need a where that's the goal and a where that's the location. Actually, yeah, I actually just said an option that I hadn't mentioned yet, which is to double mark it. Have dative and then locative. Mark both somehow. Somehow allow it to be marked for both. And just like agglutinate the marking somehow. That's not cumulative, that's like concatenative separative, rather than concatenative cumulative, in terms of the fusion. But it is more compact relatively than having two pronouns here. So it's like a compromise. It's still not, unless I want a fused version of every possible combination of two cases. But that gets me into having like, oh gosh, what is that going to be? 7 squared cases, 49? Is that 49? Yeah, that would be 49. 7 times 7 is 49. Even though patientive is unmarked, I would need to mark that a patientive is with a patientive as opposed to a patientive being with an agentive. So, oh, actually, no, because patientive doesn't need to be marked. It would be 6 by 6, which is still a lot. It's still 36 markings, 36 combinations for pronouns, which that's compact, sure, but that's not efficient to me. And from a personal standpoint, it doesn't, my brain won't really be able to think very clearly in that way. People would be like, dative of over, or like locative of the second one. I've had to do that with languages before. When they have two pronouns, that's easier to do. It just kind of becomes second nature. But having the combos there does not seem like something I want to do. So, what's the alternative here? Do I have an alternative? Let's see. Let me think about that. I think what might help is maybe thinking through what this would mean in the copular. And then there's also the thing that I said I had already thought about before, and I'm going to bring that back. And that was when we have a purpose clause. So, like, I study in order to learn. And in English, the in order to is optional. We could just say I study to learn, because to marks a purpose there, but it also marks an infinitive. So English has an ambiguity that it's like capitalizing on, and it actually goes back to the etymology of where to learn comes from. As an infinitive, it actually comes from an old dative construction with it was like a dative plus preposition thing that Old English used to do for purposes, but then it just generalized to all infinitives. Anyway, that's a sidetracked a little bit there. Let's talk about copula first. And then we'll talk about purpose. And I also want to talk about cause. I study, let's say I leave because I have a headache. And this is something we've actually talked about before when we were talking about our cases. When I was talking about like semantic roles and cases, this this whole thing is the noun clause, and then in order to learn is the noun clause. In order is just optional. In order to learn. Okay, I'm just putting the noun clauses in brackets here. Yeah, so let's go back to the copula first, then we'll talk about this. We talked about this before, but I want to see it from a different angle, like a syntax angle versus a what cases do I need angle. Okay, so this room is where I sleep. So probably room is a topic, so room. I might have a thing that marks that as like this versus not this. We talked about that a bit when I was talking about demonstratives being determiners instead of just pronouns. But I think room is going to be geographic, and making it the topic is going to be enough for now. I might decide I want something more later. So I'll say room, which is the topic, and then is where I sleep. This brings us back to the copula question. I think I said I still want a copula, didn't I? I went back and forth so many times when we were talking about adjectives, I don't even remember. I think I said I want adjectives to lean towards verbs and roots in general to lean towards verbs, so I don't need a copula most of the time. But if I have let's say I have two nouns of the same class, and I'll say like this is that, like the teacher, like this person is a teacher. I think my resolution on that was still that I would say to be a teacher could be you could take teacher, which is probably going to be human noun, but you could verbify it by taking off its human ending and then, conjugate it for its tense and stuff to mean I am a teacher. So the same would be true even if you have two nouns of the same gender or even of different genders. Like this rock is food. Like this rock is a meal. So like rock would be matter, and then meal, which is probably going to be a food noun. To be a meal, I'd take off the food marking and, make it non-past. Say, to be a meal. And because rock is patientive, it would just mean to be a meal. Now, that becomes a problem in this kind of situation where I have a noun clause. And I think it's the same problem that I already had. I think it's that I need two things. I need 3 geographic, and here it would be patientive, right? Because I'm just saying that this place exists. It's just chilling. What would be a copula, I guess, would be here. Is the place, is that place in which, still locative, I sleep. There's another solution I didn't think about before. Instead of double marking things. See, also the issue with double marking is I need a combination for patient. Yeah, I couldn't do 36. I'd still have to have more because I need a combination of patient and locative that wasn't just the same as locative. This would be patientive, and this would be locative versus locative versus patient, versus just locative. So yeah, no, the combination case idea just really doesn't work. Or even stacked cases doesn't really sound good, because you wouldn't be able to stack nothing and then locative, like a 0. So I need to mark the clause as locative somehow, or not marking the clause. The clause is not locative. The relative pronoun in question is locative. Relative geography. Same here. The only difference is now I don't have the way to say is that is marked, because while maybe the room is the place, maybe place, a geographic noun could become a verb that means to be a place. That could, exist and be conjugatable. The pronoun, I doubt, is also going to be conjugatable. That would just be kind of really confusing. It's possible I could have the pronoun be a root that would make sense to have be naked and then conjugate as a verb. But I don't want that. I really don't want my pronouns to have to be verbs. In which case I'd require a copula. Or we're back to I can't have noun clauses. I have to have a verb. Or I have to have a noun itself, like a carrier noun, that isn't just a pronoun even. Like, even this solution doesn't work. I need to have the room. Like, the room would need to be in the sentence. This is where I sleep. This is what's where. It's the room where I sleep. I'd have to say room, which, again, prevents me from a strategy to make the sentence compact, which is the opposite of what I want. Now let's try a different kind of noun class. So here are the noun clauses. This was a patientive noun clause that is equative in like a copular construction. This is a locative, or no, sorry, this is a dative, a dative noun clause. Oh wait, before I go on, there is another option I didn't think about, and the option is to mark the case of the clause on the verb so that I could decline verbs for case. This is actually something I've done before in a language. Actually, a couple. I think there are a few languages where this is actually possible that I've made, and it's sort of, yeah, no, it's not the same thing as what I was about to say. No, but what I could do is just mark the whole clause as the dative, or here it would be unmarked because it's yeah. So here it would be unmarked because it's patientive, and I don't need a copula. See, the thing is, my verb is sleep now, though. Without a copula, my verb is sleep. But if I'm unmarked, it would still be sleep. So now the issue here is I have room, and then I have sleep, and my argument of sleep is patientive. So I have two patientives. I have room patientive, sleep patientive. And that is a little confusing, potentially, because it's like, oh, if my verb is sleep, that could be like, I sleep, room, sleep. Well, I is not the subject here. I is the subject of the verb, but it is not the topic. I mean, it's not the topic. Room is the topic. Room, I sleep. You know what? Maybe this is still locative. See, before, what I was saying is that this is a geographic noun that is patientive, because that's kind of what you're doing with the English sentence. But this isn't really patientive. This is where I sleep. Some languages have a locative copula, and I could do that here by making the verb locative, just like I would make this sentence, the one in this sentence, I would make it, dative. I could make this verb dative and not need any relative pronoun here. So, let's see here. I will take you to where I sleep. I, singulative, patientive. Oh, wait, no. I forgot to mark the I as adjective, because I is the agent here. I take, non-past, you, patient, sleep, non-past, dative, first person singulative. Okay, so to so like sleep, if I mark it dative, that could potentially make the whole clause be the goal of the taking. I take you to, we're actually back at another problem. Now we have, now it sounds like sleeping is the goal of my taking you there. It sounds like the purpose, which is actually what I was going to talk about here. Now the difference, though, is when I mark purpose, what we said before when we were talking about our cases and how we were going to have purpose be dative, what we were saying before is we wouldn't need to do that with clauses, because we could just mark the purpose of a verb. Like if our purpose is a verb rather than a noun, then we could just have it be irrealis. So we would have like first person, singulative, agentive, I study, non-past. And then in order to learn, I would just have learn be irrealis. Irrealis, whatever tense I want that to be. Irrealis, let's say non-past. Yeah, in order to learn. If I put it in like past perfective, that would be like in order that I may have learned or something like that, which doesn't make as much sense as the non-past here. So I study in order to learn doesn't really need any kind of case marking, because the learning is hypothetical, and that just marks that it's the result of study. I study in order to learn. It can get tricky, though, if I have like multiple other nouns. I study philosophy, let's say. Philosophy is a... What class would that be? Would that be a concept, value, tradition? I think it would be a tradition. Cultural tradition or concept. Is it a tool? Language is a tool. Is philosophy a tool? Is it a phenomenon? I don't think it's a phenomenon or a condition or an emotion. I think it's a tool. It's somewhere between a tool and a concept, and I'm not sure which of the two it should be. I've been leaning recently for making man-made things be tools, but I am having traditions be concepts, and if philosophy feels like a cultural tradition, like there is a discipline that exists in culture called philosophy, so I'm going to make philosophy a concept. So philosophy, and philosophy is patientive. It's what I'm studying, so it has like an unmarked, zero-marked patientive. So I study philosophy in order to learn. Now, if I'm just making relative clauses be naked, if they're the patientive of that relative clause, which it is here, then there isn't actually a difference between saying, like, if this is how I do it, then I wouldn't have a distinction between I study philosophy in order to learn, or I study philosophy which I may learn. Like, I study the philosophy which I may learn, which I may learn, where philosophy is still the patient of learn. So there's nothing that tells me whether or not this is a relative clause, an adjective clause describing philosophy, or if it's the goal of study. Before, I was just saying it would be fine to have the irrealis mark that it's a goal. But technically, if I'm doing relative clauses where the relative pronoun is optional if it's a patient, then that doesn't really work. I mean, there isn't, like, in practice, in this example, there wouldn't be a distinction, really. It's not. It's the same thing. The same thing is being described. But the issue could come about in other contexts where that would be really... Those would be two different things. They could be two very different things depending on what my verb is and my result, my, desired result purpose is. So this could be circumvented by potentially marking the verb dative, marking case on the verb, to say that it is now a noun clause of study. and then if there are any arguments of learn, they would come after learn, because learn would be like the verb at the beginning. Yeah. So let me think more about what happens here, because the thing that I talked about before is I was using arealis to mark purposes here, and what I was talking about before with the cases is I couldn't really do the same thing with causes, because often the causes, it could be arealis or not realis. Like, I have a headache is not arealis, it's realis. I leave because I have a headache. Let's make it past I left because I had a headache. So I'll just change the tense here real quick. And this would make it, leave would be perfective, so it would be unmarked. And then had would probably be imperfective because it was a state of being for a while. So, yeah. So, okay, let's see. So one singulative adjective left, so it would just be leave unmarked, because I had a headache. So what we had said before is that we either have to have a word meaning because, and then have, another clause, or some kind of noun that I mark for cause, like for ablative case, that then I had a headache describes, like for the reason that I had a headache, for like the I had a headache reason, or make it all into a noun and have that noun be marked for ablative. So like, because of my headache. So headache, phenomenon, noun, first person. Whether or not headache is alienable possession or inalienable possession, I would need to think about that. Probably it's alienable because it can go away. It's not inherent to you, but it's also not something that you can just give away. So maybe I have physical conditions be inalienable. No, I like them being alienable. So I would say maybe, I would say the from the headache, so headache, ablative, and then have the first person be in the dative there. So leave, and then so we'd have headache, ablative, and then description of that would be first person, singulative, dative. The headache that is to me, or for me. The headache that's, that I am the recipient of, unfortunately, or the experiencer of, unfortunately. Actually, yeah, because datives are experiencers. That really works well for phenomena, having it be alienable. So, yeah, so I, agentive, leave, headache, ablative. So that's what we said we had to do. We had to make any cause, either make it a noun that we can then have be ablative, or have some kind of carrier noun or conjunction that means because. So like that alternative was like I, singulative, agentive, leave, and then maybe cause, like just a word that means cause, ablative, and then a relative clause that was like have first person experiencer. Actually, yeah, experiencer makes sense because it would be the experiencer of the verb have if have was a verb. And then headache, patient. I guess headache would come first. Headache. Or we can make headache a verb, right? We could have headache be the verb. Headache, and then have the first person be the patient to headache, to experience a headache. I could do that. But I kind of like having it be the experiencer. Maybe not even having a patient in there. Or have a verb have. It could be either way. Have, headache. So those are sort of my two options before. And cause ablative could be a noun cause that is ablative, or I could have like just a word that means because or something like that. Because the thing here is that I have a headache here it is describing cause, but cause doesn't really have a role in have a headache. Cause of which I have a headache. The cause being I have a headache. I have a headache is the cause. It's almost like this subordinated clause is actually a noun clause in an even bigger copular equative clause. The cause is I have a headache, in which case this whole thing would be patientive. And this would be patientive. So either way, there wouldn't be a relative pronoun, I think. Unless I had the cause be the concern, which would be ablative. Then I could have an ablative relative pronoun here. Either way, it would be clunky to have this option, which is why I was saying I would probably usually prefer to just rephrase the cause as a noun. Often it would be like a phenomenon noun or a concept noun, like the concept of the verb happening being a concept noun. And if there's like arguments within it, then I would try to find a way to make those clear or contextually drop them. However, if I'm marking the verb for case, I could just say first person. Well, why is it bold down here? What? This is strange. And this is, I must have done something weird here before and then deleted it, but then not changed the formatting again. Okay, first person singulative, agentive, leave, and then have whatever, person number, whatever. Ablative, headache, patientive, first person dative, possessor. Like experiencer, really. I experienced a headache, yeah. So, or, if I didn't want have, I could have headache, ablative. But headache isn't necessarily a noun, it could be headache, the verb. I'll specify that this is a noun because this readout, this like glossing is exactly identical to as if it were a noun. So I'm going to say this is a noun. Headache, phenomenon, ablative, versus headache, root, verb, ablative. And I could just do that. If I'm somehow marking verbs for case to make them noun clauses. Is there a reason why relative clauses would not also mark for case? Let me think. Because having verbs mark for case seems really elegant. I could even potentially have the marking for case be the same as if they were the concept, and just not have to come up with new case markings for verbs. Oh no, that wouldn't really work because I would need to still mark the verb for tense and stuff. I would want them to be easily addable to the existing endings of the verbs. Or when I say ending, I just mean marking. I don't know if it's going to be the beginning or the end. My brain is telling me it's probably going to be at the end. I'm thinking a lot of the verb endings will be vowel final, and most of the case endings could be consonant final, and then you just lop the consonant onto that verb final, that final vowel final verb ending to make it that case. However, that can be clunky, and I don't want an infinite number of vowels in the language. This kind of thing is why I haven't talked about my phonology yet. I don't want to decide how many vowels I want until I decide how many vowels I need. I don't want an infinite number of vowels because I imagine some of my noun classes might also be differentiated by what vowel is in contact with the noun declension ending. Or when I say ending again, I mean marking. I don't know if it's going to be an ending yet. It's just most of the languages I work with are predominantly suffixing languages. And that kind of vibes best with how my brain tends to work with things. Although, especially with verbs, I really like some things to be prefixes. And I might end up doing something like that with the aspect. Or the tense. and have like tense aspect be prefixed or not, depending on whether it's marked or not. So we shall see. But let me think about this. I think tentatively. Oh wait, no. I was trying to figure out why would relative adjective clauses also have a case, or would they not? Because what I've said is that the case you give to the verb in the relative clause is the case that that clause has in the matrix clause. So if you have a noun clause, the case marks the clause as a noun, in that case, in relation to the head verb. So the verb here is take, and sleep is the dative, like I sleep is the dative of take. That's tricky, because there's nothing saying that it's the place where I sleep. It's saying that just I sleep is the goal or the recipient of my taking. And that's not what I mean when I say where I sleep. That's the difference between having a relative pronoun here, where, which marks that where is the location that I sleep. So I probably do need a pronoun here, but it's not relative to the overall sentence. It's relative to the embedded sentence. It's the place in which I sleep. So, I sleep there. I'm taking you to I sleep there. To my sleeping there. Because if I just put a place, geographic, in the locative, that would just mean I sleep there. And then having it be dated would be like the clause I sleep there is where I'm taking you to. Which brings me back to noun clauses need a noun. The clause itself can't be a noun. The dative doesn't solve anything here. Because these are different kinds of noun clauses, technically. I didn't go that minute into different kinds of noun clauses, but it does have ramifications here. Where I sleep is different from in order to sleep. Right? But this would mean I take you in order so that I can sleep there. But in order that I have slept there, or that I am sleeping there, it's not in order that I can sleep there, because it's realis, it's not irrealis. So that's the difference, really, the realis versus irrealis. So this is if we mark this irrealis, it would be I take you in order to sleep, in order that I may sleep. Whereas irrealis here, this would be I take you to my sleeping. I take you to my sleeping there. Or my sleeping. And if I added a location, it would just be there. This kind of noun clause is really tricky. But it's going to come up a lot in history. Like, this is where this, Hastings is where this battle happened. So I would need that. I would need a way to say that. I wouldn't want to have to always say that Hastings is the place where the battle happened. See, I think my brain doesn't have a problem with requiring a noun, but the goals of compactness are telling me that that's too clunky. But none of my solutions are really working. None of my resolutions to prevent that are bearing fruit here. This is really nice. Having the case marked on the verb here, and here, like without these ones, these are kind of the annoying roundabout ways of getting through it. These two solutions are really nice. Oh, I should change the readout of this. This is I study philosophy in order to learn. this is different than I study philosophy that I may learn. See, that would be relative. I want to think about what relatives are, but I also want to solve this problem. I'll come back to this problem of where I sleep. Back to the relatives. What we have is these relative pronouns are marking the case that the head that we're describing would have in the clause that we're subordinating. Like, she saw me, she is dative. So we're using a dative relative pronoun here. She saw me. What would happen if I marked she saw me? What if I would mark she as, or see as dative? That would mean seeing me is the dative. That would make seeing me as a dative. Having it after woman might still make it I don't know. That might make it let's see. The woman for seeing me. Woman in order to see me is sad. Yeah, no. We wouldn't mark these we wouldn't mark these clauses with a case. They're describing something. They don't have a role in the overall verb, the matrix verb. They have a relationship to the noun, so they're related by way of a relative pronoun. So that works. I wonder if I even need a relative marking. Woman, she saw me. The woman, she saw me was sad. Woman, she left was sad. Woman is pink was sad. Woman saw me. A woman I saw was sad. That's the same as English. Woman I saw was sad. Just slightly different grammar, but am I okay with that? Because that's a little bit syntactically ambiguous. I could require a pronoun even if it's the patient's, like, woman I saw her was sad, woman she saw me was sad. How do I know what is the head verb? Well, being sad is not really subordinate to seeing her. How do I know who was sad? I think that's another question I have. Well, I know I isn't sad because if we have a subordinated verb, all the arguments will come after it. So it's not a subordinated verb, it's the head. If we have just a verb with nothing after it, it's probably the main verb. Even if there was something after it, if it's in a different case, that's a bit different. So, woman I saw was sad to me. That would be another first person dative. But that could be like, I saw the woman. Sadness was to me. None of that makes sense. I don't think it's ambiguous. Even if it might be theoretically syntactically ambiguous, it is more compact, more efficient, and the ambiguity is contextually clear. I think it will be usually clear because of the order. So what I'm going to establish is what order I'm going to put things in. So my order so far is, okay, so at least overall we're going to do, so it's going to be topic verb, and I'm going to have topic verb. I'm going to have noun, adjective, and including adjective clause, and then within a relative clause, because adjectives are verbs for the most part. So nouns, adjectives, it's going to be verb arguments. If it's a relative, if it is a relative clause, then there's going to be a relative pronoun first. Because I'm thinking I might even require a pronoun with here. I might require a whom here. Because even though it's less compact, it's still more compact than having to have some kind of, I don't know. I think it, as not maximally compact as it is, being able to have just the order determine things and clear up ambiguity with a pronoun is more compact than some of these other solutions where I'm like double marking things. Either double marking or having two pronouns. I'd rather just have one pronoun and even have it be the same as if it were a demonstrative or personal pronoun, a third person, because third persons and demonstratives are the same. So it's like woman, I saw her. Woman, she saw me. Woman, she left. All these was sad, because the head verb is going to be after the topic, and all of that is the topic. That's clear. And none of these other arguments are the topic of the second verb because we already have a verb. And also, we have woman and a relative pronoun. Like, we have two pronouns here, which, like, if we have woman and then we have she, like, we have another pronoun that is the same gender as her, it's probably it's probably the antecedent. Woman is probably the antecedent, and this is probably relative. Like, it's clear from the syntax. When you have woman, she, that's going to be woman who, woman that. I saw. So that order makes it clear. I just want a way to, I'm struggling to actually write this correctly. I don't know why this is so hard for me right now. I've been talking for a long time. So relative clauses, I'll say relative, even though that's just what adjectives are relative clauses technically. I'll have a pronoun. If it's a third person. Oh. Do I even need a pronoun if it's a first person? Wait, you don't really use relative pronouns on. Like, I who ate cake am happy. He ate cake, was happy. I think I would rather just rephrase that if I were going to put a relative clause on a first or second person. You who have done your homework, like those of you who have done your homework are getting good grades. So we would say like, they have done their homework. I would rather just rephrase it. Because you've done your homework, you're getting good grades. You're getting good grades because you've done your homework. That's way more efficient. That's a way more logical way to say that. Nouns, and then relatives after them. And then we have relatives are, we only really have relatives on third persons typically. If we need it in a first person, I would rather just not use a relative clause at all. Three third person pronoun. I'll just say pronoun, and then verb. Wait. If we're requiring a verb or a pronoun, even when it's patientive, does that mean we are requiring it with adjectives? Do we have to say woman, she, pink, sad? Woman, she is pink, sad. No. No. No, I'm going back to having patientives be nothing. Yeah. If it's patientive, it's nothing. I'm back to that. I'm back on that train. Pronoun. And I'll say optional if patientive. If there's ever an ambiguity with this kind of thing, adding the pronoun would clear the ambiguity. And then I'd have my verb and then everything else. So I have topic, verb, everything else. I have noun, adjective. I'll still call it an adjective clause. Everything else, or yeah, I guess noun, adjective. And well, do possessors come before or after adjective clauses? I think they come after. I think they come after, and the reason for that is it won't be ambiguous if you have two pronouns next to each other. Like if I have like to me for like my, and then I have, third person pronoun. So let's say I have book, like the book, like my book, which I like. Oh no, that would be patientive. My book, which my book, which, where would I have a book not be patientive in a relative clause? Maybe my book, which, my book in which I wrote. There, the book would be locative. Okay, so it'd be like my book. So I'll say like possessive. And possessive could be dative or ablative, and then, and then optional adjective. And then adjectives are relative clauses, basically. So then we could still have the like adjective relative, like the things like pink and stuff like that. As long as it is the quality that they have, it's going to be patientive and therefore won't require a pronoun. So you'll never need to say like, woman, she, pink. But like the pinkifying woman, the woman who makes things pink, then you'd have like an agentive pronoun there. The woman, she pinks is sad or was sad. So let's say I want to say like my. It's gonna go over. Let's just make. I don't feel like merging cells again. I'm just gonna make this not be. This cell not wrap. Okay, so let's say my book, in which I write. Now the my is potentially like redundant. But I'm gonna pretend it's not. It could be like her book in which I write. Maybe I'm writing in her book or something. But in this kind of a situation, in this kind of a situation, I would have. Let's make. I just wanted to copy the formatting of this cell really. So I'd have book, which would be tool. I'm presuming tool gender. I would have. It's alienable, so I'd have dative. And then in which I write, so I is the agent of write, but write is going to come first because it's a relative clause. Write, and then I am the agent of writing, so it's first singulative, agentive. But then in which, I'm going to need a relative pronoun for that because it's not the writing by me book. I mean, it is, but it's not the book is not patientive here. I didn't write the book. If I didn't have a pronoun here, this would be my book which I wrote. That's what if I had this here, this would be my book which I wrote. Is what book first dative, write first agentive would be. my book which I wrote. But book, what I would need instead, actually I'm going to copy these down here just to have some more example. Whoa, adjective clause. Whoa, I'm scrolling too far. And it's not even that I'm scrolling too far, it's that the Google Sheets is lagging. Alright, I'm going to say, this is this sentence I want, and then this is what this one means. So this is my book which I wrote. Whoa. Actually, this is not what this is, technically, because technically it's in the wrong tense. Are these all centered? I don't understand why this is off. I don't understand what is going on here. Oh. Whoops. Honestly, the formatting of this doesn't really matter that much because I'm going to get rid of it anyway. But, just for me to look at later and not be confused. Alright, my book which I wrote is what this would be, because I wrote would be perfective past. And therefore, my 0 marked one. The book in which I write would need to be marked non-past. Okay, so how am I going to say the book in which I write? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have book, first singular, or singulative, dative, then I'm going to need a relative pronoun that is in the locative. So, in which I write. Well, I still want the pronoun to agree with the gender of book, so it's going to be a third person tool, and it's locative. It's in which I write. It's the place where I write. So it's not a geographic location where I write. That would be the different gender. But this is like the location in relation to writing. It is the location of writing. So then it will be write, non-past, first person singulative, adjective again. So everything else is the same in this relative clause, except this one doesn't need a pronoun, because book is the patient of write here, because it's the book I wrote. But here, it needs a pronoun because it is the location where I wrote. And so that's what this order here means. So I have noun, possessive, and this is what I mean when I say it's not going to be ambiguous if I put the possessive first after the book and not second, because having these two pronouns here makes it very clear that this is a relative clause after the possessive. And here, there's no ambiguity. There's no, like, world in which I'm going to think that this is the agent of write. Because, or not the agent, this is like a dative that's been topicalized of write. Because I already have an argument before it. I have book. And relative clauses are always going to have the verb come first. They're not going to move something to be the topic. And I don't know what the rest of my sentence is. So, like, my book in which I write is finished, or, like, is green, or something. That verb to be green would come after. And that would be my main verb, just like up here, where, like, we have two verbs. We have see and we have sad. Sad comes last, which kind of indicates everything before it. Either everything before it is the topic, or if it has a case on it, like dative, then it's the goal and not the main verb. So it's going to be unambiguous in that sense, potentially. Now, there is a world in which this could be misconstrued, where book is separate and first dative is its own, that I'm describing with I wrote, so this would be like the me, who's maybe an experiencer of some verb, which I wrote. But that doesn't make any logical sense, having the pronoun be, again, I'm mostly not going to have first and seconds be relativized, like have relative clauses describing the first and second pronoun. So again, it's really not that ambiguous if I just do that. So having the patient not mark, like not have a pronoun, but everything else be marked makes sense. Okay, that still doesn't solve the where I sleep problem. There's probably a really simple solution I'm just not thinking of because my brain is fried. But let's see here. I will take you to where I sleep. I will take you to the room where I sleep. And I study in order to learn. There was actually a problem here too, if I remember correctly. The problem was, this could be, I study the philosophy which I learn. I may learn. Where it's relative, because it could be that philosophy is the patient of learn in a relative clause like this. Like this could be a relative. Learn, irrealis, non-past could be the a descriptor of philosophy, and it wouldn't require a pronoun because it's the philosophy would be the patient of learn. So it is technically ambiguous. I don't think it's that ambiguous. I could also, if I have a clause like this, where, actually that's a problem. If I put learn, like learn, etc. first, this would also be ambiguous, because this could mean, and probably would more likely mean if this were the order, I study in order to learn philosophy. So learning is the goal of study, so it's still dative. And then philosophy is the object, or not object, but the patient of learn. I study in order to learn philosophy. That's a problem. Now I could require, in these kind of clauses, I could require a resumptive agent here. So like, in order that I may learn. In order that I may learn philosophy, versus if I don't put the I may learn there, maybe like learn is one thing, philosophy is its own thing. But I would rather just have learn come after. And the fact that it could be a descriptor of philosophy, I mean, that could get confusing in other scenarios. But the fact that I'm marking the verb itself for a case really makes it clear that it's not a relative pronoun to me. Because our relative clause to me. Because none of our relative clauses do that. Relative clauses aren't arguments of the verb, they're descriptors of the noun. So if it were the philosophy which I learned, there would be no dative marking. Yeah, there would be no dative marking here. Learn is just another argument of study. And it's a dative as opposed to a patientive. The zero marked. Yeah. So that problem is solved as well, because if I mark verbs for case. So I think I will just say, so noun clauses, it's going to be noun, and then it's going to be case, and the case could be 0, because if it's patientive, right? I'm going to make case smaller font so I don't have to like drag, like I don't want to change the size of this, so I'm just going to make it smaller. That's still not small enough, probably. I'm willing to bet it's not going to be small enough. Let's make it 7. Please be small enough. Yeah, okay. Noun, case, pronoun. Pronoun will need case too, of course. So pronoun case. Oh no, it doesn't copy over the formatting. I forgot about that. I think pronoun can also be smaller because it's capitalized, so it's small caps. Let's make it 8. Let's make it 9. It's fine. Should be small enough. Fingers crossed. No. Because I have the note, I don't need the parentheses. Because most of the time I'm going to be there, unless it's patientive, and I can just remember that. Yeah. Okay. In case verb. Okay, so I have topic, verb, everything else. I have noun. Nouns are noun, their case, possessives if they are there, and then adjective clauses if I have them, and then adjectives. And for noun clauses, it would just be noun. Instead of noun, it would be verb. It would just be verb here. So noun clauses. Okay. There's one last type of verb clause I wanted to talk about. And this is something that gets a little tricky, or a little like more heady, I guess, potentially. Depending on how we want to look at it. So this is where we get into like what is a verb and what is an auxiliary modal type thing, and whether I want to treat them the same. Also, I want to make philosophy something shorter because I want to see if I can fit all this in one line. I think I'm just going to say science. Science. Okay. Please fit in one line. Please. Okay, there we go. Science. No, stop it. Okay. Okay, I study science in order to learn. Okay. I know this is like probably the most redundant example I could have come up with. Okay, so let's say something more like, I want, I'm going to capitalize things. Let's put the translation here. I want to go to the beach, let's say. So, there's a couple things to think about here. So want is our verb, and it'll be non-past. We could have it be patientive of want. We could also have it be an experiencer. I kind of like it as an experiencer, because if we say something like, I want pizza, for example, pizza would be patientive. But I don't really want to say that I is agentive. Now, if I choose pizza, that's doing something more active. And I could have want and choose be the same verb, but have want take a agent, and then, choose take an agent and want take an experiencer. So I'm going to say that I am an experiencer of want. So I experience desire. Why am I writing exp? That should just be dative. It is an experiencer, but it's dative case in this language. So I want, oh wait, I need to uncross this cell out. Okay, there we go. I want non-past, and then if it were pizza, pizza would be patient, right? I want pizza. You know what? I'm just going to copy these cells down just so that I could say I want pizza. So I have both examples to demonstrate that pizza is the patient here of want. I could swap the order too. I could have pizza be the topic, of course, but I'm just making this the topic for comparative reasons. I want pizza. And then I choose pizza could be first person, agentive, want pizza. I guess like want could be like a root that means like to elect something or desire something, and if I actively desire it, I choose it. And if I passively desire it, I'm doing it. I'm experiencing the desire. I'm a dative recipient of the desire. Okay. Here, though, I want to go to the beach. To go to the beach is a noun clause, kind of like to where I sleep was a noun clause. But it's more actually like to learn. I study in order to learn. So go to the beach. So it would be go, irrealis, non-past. Beach, dative. Now there is kind of like there was up here with learn, because it's like in order that I may learn, there's like an I that's being kind of deleted from learn, because it's the same. Here we have an agent and here we have an agent. Like the I in study and the I in learn would both be the agent here. It could be different, but I'm not repeating it. I'm just having learning, hypothetically learning being the goal. And who it is, I'm not marking, but probably it's the first person again, but it could be someone else in order that you may learn, maybe. But we would just put whoever's learning that isn't ourselves here. Because the first person is the subject, so it's deletable later. If it were someone else, then we would put them in. So here, I'm saying I want that I may go to the beach. So I is again being deleted here. I've made I the subject. That's why I did it up here. I did not pizza be a subject just because I didn't want it to. I didn't want to be the topic. So I want to go to the beach. Now here, when it was like I want to study, or I study science in order to learn, learning was dative because learning was a goal of study. But here, learning or going isn't the goal of wanting. You don't want in order to go. You want something like pizza. The thing that you want when you want something, the wanter is an experiencer here, and the thing you want is just the patient. It is the thing that's wanted. Because if we were to make this an intransitive verb with pizza, we would say like pizza is desirable or pizza is wanted. So we'd have want pizza, patientive, and that would be like pizza is desired, pizza is desirable, pizza is wanted, etc., etc. So that is how we're going to do. That's how that works. So pizza is patientive either way. Now here, technically, going to the beach is still the patient. So we would just not mark this verb. We would not mark it. So this is like technically we are marking this verb kind of with a 0 to say that it's the patient. But patient is 0 marking. So it's going to be like a null marker here. And this is going to how it's going to work for a lot of things if we have this kind of construction. Now, what some languages might do is they might have a special form of the verb, like a tense or it would be a mood, really. It would be a desiderative mood for wanting. I'm going to do another sentence. Actually, let's do 2 more. Let's change it to need, actually. Let's change it to need. Like, I must have pizza. I need pizza. So let's say I need pizza, and I need to go to the bathroom. No, let's say I need to, I need to leave. Let's make it simpler. Which is actually true. It is 6 after. We've gone 6 minutes over. I'll wrap up right as soon as I finish this. I just wanted to get through this, so I know what I want to do. So, I need pizza. That's going to be first singular dative. Because I'm an experiencer of need, I think. Here, I think this still makes sense. Need pizza. Because if we were to make this intransitive again, we'd say pizza is necessary. Pizza is needed. So need, verb, okay, non-past, sorry. Need, non-past. Non-past is coming up a lot because I'm using a lot of present tense examples. Because we tend to talk about things in the present tense and generic stuff. But present is not going to be as common in the language because I'm going to be talking about history a lot. So that's why you're seeing a lot of past. I could have made these examples in the past, and that would have probably been better for this this language, but it is what it is. So pizza, again, is still the patient of need. It is what is needed. So pizza is needed would be the intransitive. If we just had like need pizza, not need non-past pizza, 0 marking for patientive. Pizza is needed. And then we're adding an experiencer of need. I need pizza. Pizza is necessary for me, to me. I have needed pizza. So like dative, again, is also an alienable possession. So it's like I possess a need of pizza as well. It's just there's no noun need. It's a verb need. Now I need to leave would be the same kind of thing. I need, non-past, and then leave. And again, like with here, going to the beach is hypothetical. It's something I want. Here, leaving is also hypothetical. Leaving irrealis, non-past. Now, the reason I bring this up and want to figure this out before I leave is because we could just say that these are not noun classes, or noun clauses. Again, just like in order to learn is a noun clause, or because I have a headache, because I had a headache is a noun clause. The reason I am not doing that, or no, I think I might still do that, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because, in some languages, they have moods for this, and we kind of already decided that hypotheticals are irrealis. That's what they are here anyway. So if we have something that we hypothetically want, like something that's a wish, we could just say, for I want to go to the beach, add a row below, we could just say, I come on. On Google Sheets works with me here. I just merged these cells. What? And I typed. I didn't register any of it. Okay, I adjective go irrealis non-past beach dative. So all this really means is I hypothetically go to the beach. Now, so it's like I may go to the beach. This doesn't really say I want to go to the beach, but because I talked about how I didn't want all these different types of irrealis because I doubt I'll need them. Having them be the same, just all irrealis be one, kind of implies that I can do this and have this mean a wish. Like, may I go to the beach? Like, may it come to pass that I go to the beach? In which case, this kind of is saying, I want to go to the beach. May it be that I go to the beach. Now, again, this language isn't really intended for, the kind of everyday use where you would want to say wishes and needs very often. But if I'm quoting someone who's saying something like that, I might need to say that. So these would actually mean the same thing, potentially. And what I can do to clarify that, I could allow both constructions and just have one that's more vague and one that is less vague. Because this, like, I could do the same thing with leave and have I need to leave be like, may I leave? Like, may it happen? Like, I may leave. It is hypothetical that I will leave. And have that express a need. Like, I must leave. It is imperative that I leave. I'm not actually leaving. It's not realis. It's irrealis. But it is a thing that I require. So it would be like the same here. But if I were to do that, if I were to do first singulative, agentive again, leave, irrealis, non-past. If I were to do that, I would want, even in this vaguer one, I would want some kind of marker to show that it's a desire and not just any old irrealis. So I might need an adverb or something. So I could have maybe want could be a noun, like a desire. Maybe it could be a phenomenon or something, a condition, and then an ablative, because of desire. I may go to the beach because I want to, or something like that. And then this would be like, I may leave because of necessity. And that would be maybe a concept. Due to necessity. Due to, because of, so that's ablative. So I have these two different options for this. Same thing. And honestly, I think that's fine. I think if this were a normal language, people were actually speaking to each other, which, according to someone's question last week, might happen if other people like the language. That might happen, maybe, if other people want to learn the language and they want to speak it in everyday stuff, not just for the purpose of, humanities, social sciences stuff. They might have the option of having both, like saying both. but I'd probably default to maybe the first kind, where it is a noun clause. That's what I tend to do in languages. That might just be because I do speak a lot of languages where we have modal auxiliaries that have like subordinate verb clauses, and that's like bleeding through into my conlangs. But it's not exactly the same as having an auxiliary, because these are verbs in their own right that are then having subordinate clauses. They're not actually auxiliaries, because they're verbs in their own right. We see that here. I want pizza and I need pizza. They're their own verbs. They're not auxiliaries. They just can act as auxiliaries in languages. But yeah, I think, yeah, okay. So that's noun clauses. It is 14 after. I'm gonna say that I want to make sure that I've marked that these could be verbs, just so that I remember that I'm saying that verbs can mark for case. Could be verb in noun clause, which marks for case. And then on my verb sheet, I'm just going to quickly write that I need verbs, whatever the endings are, must be compatible with having case endings, or case marking. Must be able to mark for case. Okay, so if we go back to my agenda, that is adjective clauses and noun clauses. Next, I'm going to talk, so next time, I'm going to talk about coordination, because what I just talked about, all this, is that's subordination. Subordinate clauses, relative adjective clauses describing nouns, and noun clauses that are subordinating entire verb, like with arguments, in order to be a noun to a bigger sentence. So both of those are subordination. So now that I kind of have some ideas for that, and I'll come back to the general question of adjectives, although more and more, the more I talk about it, the more it makes sense to have adjectives be verbs with this kind of system. Next time we're going to talk about coordination, where we have things like and, or but, and how that's going to work. Because before, I had kind of a vague idea that I might not even have a word for and just allow things to be next to each other. But given the way I'm using syntax to clarify, like word order, to clarify subordination, instead of like special marking, I don't think that's going to work anymore, and I will need coordinators in some way, shape, or form. So I'm going to talk about that next time. And then I'll talk about any other, so order and ambiguity, this is just sort of like any other sort of word order things I need to figure out before I move on to talk about root shape, declension, figure out my adjectives once and for all, verb conjugation that is compatible with the declension. That's why I put declension first. Then I can get into discourse, and then finally get into phonology. Okay, so that is all for today. Thank you, everyone who's here. One last time, I'm going to say the next stream will be on Thursday, this coming Thursday, from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Let me triple check that that is correct real quick. I'm like 99% sure that's correct. Yeah, so it's, so it is, Thursday from 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Pacific. So if you check my Twitch, that will be localized to your time zone. So that will be the next conlang with me. I hope to see you there, or future people who are watching or recording this. I hope you all are having a wonderful day, night, morning, evening, whatever time it is. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day or night. Thank you for being here, and farewell.